3rd, and we're having a joint meeting of the Finance Committee and the Select Board.
Do we have enough people here for the finance?
Sure.
Of course. Okay, good.
It's 2014, not 32.
That's it, 2 to 2. We got it even. It's a volleyball game, beach volleyball game.
So this is our first fiscal year 15 budget meeting. One of several. Is this the just the two of you? You don't have?
Well, I think Ricky's going to be here, and I hope Tom will. I got word from David this afternoon. He's not able to make it, unfortunately. He thought he would be here. But we're willing to go forward, and we'll make what progress we can.
Let the chips fall where they may.
I don't want to hold up the process.
Ted,
Yes.
Ricky called and she said she doubted she'd be here. She sounded terrible on the phone.
She was, yeah, she's been ill the last couple of days, so you might be looking at just the two of us.
Yeah. Tom, when he shows up a little late sometimes.
Much easier to focus on, just two of you.
You got a third player on your team?
Ron is out of town. I
Yes.
believe he was and won't be back till the 12th or some such thing as that.
It should be a quick meeting.
Well, let's go forward.
Oh, no, well, we can drag this out.
Oh.
Oh, come on.
There are four audio recording devices and one video recording device. Right? And you've got your book.
I have. We do.
Yep, we do.
To get us started with, so that's a great thing.
Thank you for the books.
Before we go any further down the agenda,
Yes.
since yesterday was Super Bowl Sunday,
Yes.
I lost all track of what's really important. What happened with Puxatawny Phil? Did he see his shadow?
He saw his shadow.
Yeah, 6 weeks.
Six more weeks of winter.
Yes, sir.
Evidence of today and Wednesday.
Winter roads will be overspent. Pretty sure.
We're headed that way. We're headed that way, sir. All right, so we're in a position. Mary has put together some homework for us here on general budget overview, general discussion, and tonight we have the Historical Commission.
Although that one, they may not have a request, but their meeting time to make that decision didn't match up, so I may slot them in a little bit later.
Okay.
Everyone else I think is here, and the budget is in the 2-3 section.
Well, it's all right with everybody. I think those that are coming in to talk about their budget, then we can get into general discussion of one of the things I want to touch on tonight is where we are in the fiscal 14 budget, how we're proceeding on that. The Select Board has roughed out a March 10th special town meeting date, so I think it'd probably be a good idea for us to talk with the Finance Committee members that are here about what issues we see coming up for that.
Good.
But I think people's time is valuable. We may as well run through them. So we don't have anybody here from the Historical Commission right now. A sewer budget.
And I did talk to Nancy Hoff. She thought that she would try to be here. I don't see her here yet. You do have that in your 2-3 section.
Yep.
That's the first one. And just a quick note, obviously these books aren't complete yet. If you take the books with you, I'll bring you out a sleeve each week with more material that you can put in. If you leave your books here, I'll put it in. You can do it either way individually. In the front pocket, you'll always have the agenda, and this time there's also something about a finance workshop. And then in the back is a special town meeting draft.
So we'll wait for, do we need the sewer to describe?
Well,
budget that we have?
we don't have any members of the sewer commission here.
If you wanted to go ahead to do it here, then if the commissioner doesn't show up, we can talk through the budget. Okay. Talk to Betty about it.
Where's the truck they wanted to get?
That will be on the special town meeting in March.
Well, the sewer department is always pretty much a wash. They take care of their own expenses.
It is, and
I
they take
always
it all
wondered
out
how
of the
much,
enterprise
why we
fund.
spend so much time going over it.
Well, I don't think we really spent a lot of time, but it is kind of interesting to see.
Oh,
Here's Nancy now.
That's right.
How about if you have like a easy in, easy out night here? Because we just pulled your budget out of the book and what do you
You
have?
have your budget up in the chair here, so you can see. Sure. Do you have a copy of this? Realize you made the button.
I don't think it's terribly high finance or complicated.
So it looks like you're talking about a total budget of just shy of 140,000.
Yeah. I've been in that ballpark for several years now.
Am I correct in thinking that surplus revenue in the enterprise fund is somewhere around $80,000? Is that?
We might be slightly higher than that, but it's under 100,000 now because we've done some work down at the plant. But, yes. And we draw up to 10,000 off of that often each year to offset the charges to our users.
So I'm just going back and remembering my tenure on that. I mean, you set the budget much the same way as the town sets the budget.
Yeah.
You just, even though you're trying to be conservative with the rates and so forth, any surplus ends up in that account, so.
Correct.
What,
And we're hoping, with Brian's help and the green folks, we isolated the marsh system, got permission from DEP that the whole lower greenhouse does not have to be heated, so we've isolated one end of it to where there's equipment, and so that far little corner is heated, but the rest isn't, so we're expect a good savings in our fuel bill. So that's our
it's too early to see that yet.
yeah, it was just completed, so
So last year's budget, I guess I was looking on my expense report here, but I don't see it. It's probably on a separate one.
well, it's within 2,000 of what you're seeing here now. We really have not varied off of this figure much in the past few years. Betty has just streamlined and streamlined and streamlined.
And we're not gonna see anything on electricity, even though we signed the solar, but
That's
we're waiting,
it's down the road.
right, before you see anything.
And Tom, on your budget sheet that you all have in front of the book, you'll have the FY14
Page 4.
appropriation.
Page 4.
And were you looking for about?
So I was looking for a balance on how you're doing this year, but not that it's really my business, but.
Sure. I mean, how much we've consumed of this year's budget?
Yeah, last year was 134,178 is what was voted.
Well, would like the maintenance and repairs. We often don't use the 10,000, but it seems like we'd be foolish not to have 10,000 there because anything can happen. So we will have an expense of buying a used truck. That'll be coming up. It won't be in this budget. We hope we could resolve that before annual town meeting. So that's, we'll probably see some savings in our maintenance, but we will have an expense of a truck and we'll pull it out of our enterprise fund, I imagine.
Out of the surplus revenue.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions?
Cap it at 10,000. This is a vehicle that, you know, it's mandated by the state that we have a vehicle because we're hauling pumps that could, you know, have sewage on them and this and that, so. But there's no sense in having a new one. This might get 1,000 miles a year on it, maybe. So we hope to find something to use.
Nancy, where would that money come from to buy such a vehicle? Would it come out of that $80,000
Yeah.
amount?
I mean, we could wait till annual meeting and put some of it in here, but it seems that that's what that money is for.
But it's not a capital request we make of the town over and beyond your own budget?
No,
You got your
no,
request.
no. All of ours comes right out of what
Okay.
we do.
All right.
Is the fuel propane?
We have both. The bulk is propane, but where the office is, and our boilers and our little maintenance area there, that is still oil. And I don't know if you remember the debacle of us pre-ordering oil and then not using it all. So we have a couple situations of we're believing we will switch that to propane also because we have an underground tank and we would like to get out of the business of an underground tank. And so we're just using the oil up. And so we think by the spring, summer, it would be time to make that conversion. It's been difficult to find people who want to bid on it. There's a couple out there. And then we will be all propane.
So would you be thinking at that point of removing that tank? or-
Yes, yep.
It's amazing how in a few years, how it can change.
Yes, yes. What was the,
Newest, hottest,
It was
best, most
exactly.
economical thing.
yes, or just the best way to do it, and now we don't want the liability of a tank underground. Thank you. Any
Janet,
others?
Ted, do you have any other questions? Or?
No, I don't. You've got the salary increases in here at 2%, right? Those have been adjusted. Okay.
Overall, the plant has run very, very well. It has for years, but we had a whole year there, and I don't know if that's come up in conversation, where Betty was on her own. We did not have an assistant. And that conversation has come up, or should come up, that she could not use her vacation time. We feel she should be compensated for not being able, and she can't roll it over anymore, so we think she should be compensated for that. It'll all come out of our funds, it won't come to the town at all. But we have this woman, Michelle, from Conway. We actually got her through her daughter. Her daughter was a graduate in this field and applied for the job, but then she got scooped up by Tig and Bond, or one of our engineering firms, because that's her degrees in designing systems. So, but in the process, her mom got real interested in it. It's just so nice to have an assistant that's just a town away. I mean, we have never had it this good before. Somebody came up from the valley. We couldn't monitor the hours or anything. So staff-wise, we are in the best that I know since I've been involved. It's really, really good.
Now, this is something that I guess I don't fully understand. How do we manage, in the case of somebody like Betty, to spell her off for vacation time and budget for that? Do we build into her salary?
Well, I think it's been built into Assistant 1 and 2 in relief. I think that's where we build it in. I mean, Betty gets her salary.
That's a
and
straight
That's a
salary.
straight salary. The other people are hourly.
Yep.
And that's going back to our assistant, Michelle, it was her daughter Rebecca, but Rebecca's still in the area, and it's like Betty's out of town. Rebecca's willing to come on board as assistant two or the relief, so Betty really can use her vacation time now, which we've just never had a situation where she could.
So if I've got this, just let me make up some numbers.
You make it up.
Well, what I do is make it up. 52 weeks out of the year,
Yeah.
let's say the person has 2 weeks vacation, just for simple calculation.
Yeah,
You would basically build in kind of a 50-week salary for that person, or no, 52 weeks, I guess, because they get paid vacation, right? And then you would down in assistant one or assistant two, build in
extra hours.
extra hours for that person who will come in and relieve the director, the head of the
Yes, yeah,
operation for those 2 weeks. That's the way it's done.
yeah.
Okay.
And in the scheduling thing, it's just worked real well. See, the other person had like a day job and just came up and did the hours in the evening or something, but now Michelle is assistant and they overlap one day a week.
Yep.
So there's just this continuity and people knowing what's happening, and it's just,
It's working.
it's the best that I've been around my 10 years, so I'm very pleased.
Okay.
And on your special town meeting warrant at the back of the book, you'll see Article 1.
Article 1 does talk about taking 4,000 and change from the sewer enterprise fund to compensate Betty, our plant operator, for her unused vacation time. We feel it's the least we can do. She was working 7 days a week for almost a year. It's the
But
least.
in future, would that be?
That won't happen because as long as we have this team of Michelle and Rebecca, it's not going to happen. And I mean, nothing's forever. So, but we feel we're in a good place, and between them, we just have good contacts of who else is in the loop that we can draw on.
Because if I understand correctly, now our personnel policies read in such a way that if you haven't used your vacation time by a certain point,
Exactly.
what,
That's why
a year and a half after or something like that, you lose it.
Right, and that's why we're coming to you, because
Yeah.
the tax collector was saying to her, she loses it. We say, no, this is extenuating circumstances. We're not trying to set a precedent of how people are handled in town or breaching the contract. There was no one else to cover.
All right. So this is a one-time exception.
This
that's
is a
being
one-time exception to take care of when we...
I think one of the things that you have to really be aware of when running the sewage treatment plant, as I remember, is DP sets a lot of parameters that we have to live within. You know, you're going to have an operator of such a grade, so many hours, and regardless if it's 1 or 6 people, they have to have a certain, it's a class, right? Class.
Yeah, there's the take courses and pass tests to be in a certain class or category.
And I mean, that certainly is one of the larger parameters that DEP puts on manpower.
Yep.
But even talking about having a truck.
We've had one and it won't pass inspection anymore. I think it was a used Toyota. It runs fine, but I think it may have been in that era when Toyota had bad frames, so it won't pass inspection now.
That's all been helpful.
Okay, great.
And you're figuring $10,000 for
That's
the
our
truck.
cap on the truck.
I would think pretty confidently you could find.
I have no doubt we buy
It's a
this.
separate question.
Okay, perfect. Got it.
Okay.
Mhm.
No other-
Thank you, Mary.
Any other questions for Nancy? Thank you.
Sure.
Do you need to open your meeting now that you've got a quorum?
Yes, I will call our meeting to order now at 7:21. And we're subscribing to the notion that the minutes of this particular meeting will stand for the minutes of the Finance Committee in order to economize on our efforts and make things clear.
since there's only 3 of you, all 3 of you can concentrate on the budget instead of keeping minutes.
That was the whole idea. We wanted to just razor sharp on this sort of thing.
Very good. All right, so thank you, Nancy. That's great. Animal control. I saw somebody that looked like an animal controller.
In uniform.
Yeah, very professional. Look at him.
Don't be shy, Warren. Step up front here.
Come on, we got the hot seat over there for you, Warren. Next to Mary.
Where would you like me to step up front?
If you want to look, you're up.
My problem is when the blower starts,
Yeah.
I may miss something.
I have problems like that all the time.
So what do you think? It's kind of a big increase from 2,386 to 2,450.
I know it. Don't know if we can afford it. But we should be able to, but that's why I put it in. According to my arithmetic anyway.
So,
That's
with all the changes, and since we're lucky enough to have a full-time legislature, you know, we send these lawmakers and they feel they have to make laws. Does this amount of money operate animal control in Ashfield
This amount?
satisfactorily?
It should, yes. And I can see nothing changing. If there was some big changes in what they dictated that we have to do, but I've been keeping up with it, so we don't have any shocks to the system. And so consequently, we just kind of drifted into it, and it's just kind of leveled off at this point. You see the operating went up a little bit too. As a matter of fact, I may even run out of money this year, and that's basically mileage, because I don't have a vehicle. And other than that, I don't see anything that's earth-shattering that's going to, you know, say, hey, we need X amount of dollars next year at this time. You know? But this year I might. I'm running low right now. But and the selectmen have always said, and the finance committee always said, let us know ahead of time. So.
Yeah, any idea this year how much you think you might be short, or?
If it keeps going the way it is, I would say it's probably $200. I mean, again, not earth-shattering. It's just, it's the arithmetic that I gotta play with to get it out right.
So at the moment, it's 45%.
I'm sorry?
At the moment, you're 45% expended on expenses?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's, you know, everything,
But-
all of it. Yeah, the budget was $550, and I think I'm down to like $289 right now, or something like that. So we've got a few months to go. So I might not, but I just thought I'd say that.
Warren, one
Yeah.
question for you. I'm looking at your wage line. Have you given yourself a full 2% increase? It looks to me like you've given less than a 1% increase to the wages.
Yeah, I'm not percentages. I'm not jumping on. I'm just going by what I think the budget might be able to stand and what I can live with. So
Well, we on the finance committee, I think, are advocates, as is the select board, with the concept of an across-the-board 2%. It's not terribly generous, but we think the finances of the town would allow us, at least as a going-in proposition, to suggest a 2% increase. And if you did that, your wages, instead of $18.50 for this coming fiscal year, should be $18.73. It's not big money, I understand that, but I think to be square with everybody, we ought to say you get 2% as well.
Right.
May I just-
No, if the town would like to give my.
Am I misunderstanding something?
I guess I have a question for the board. In the past, Warren is down as a stipend. In the past, we have not adjusted
Oh, I
stipends.
see, all right, I
Yeah,
stand
we
corrected.
did. We've been adjusting some of
Emergency
them.
That's why he
management.
got from
No,
18 to, you've made some
36.
changes in stipends. We made changes
But
in the
not
number of stipends
2%.
last year, but in general, we haven't brought them up 2% because you end up with very tiny little.
Sure, he did last year. He went from 18 to 1836, that was the 2%. We have been, not all of them, like we didn't do the select board or the finance committee.
But select stipends, if it's select stipends,
We were doing some of them, yes.
maybe need to figure out which ones do and don't go up.
Right.
Yeah, because the moderator
That's what
didn't
I
go
was-
up at all.
I was noticing that I thought that his was not the 2% as well.
So one thing to correct is, first of all, that's not wages in this instance, it's a stipend. We should understand that. And then revisit the question of whether the stipend should be adjusted
How
up.
we want to handle stipends, and on your budget sheet, wherever it's a stipend over in remarks, it'll say stipend to
Okay.
help
All right.
differentiate.
Well, let me come back from my comment then and simply suggest, let's leave it as Warren's got it for now at 1850.
Liked your first thought.
I do
I
too.
think the
I think it should be
2%
2%.
change to his stipend is, I was going to say it and you just said it before me.
But
It's a total of
that doesn't-
$13
That doesn't
more.
stand for the concept of adjusting all stipends upward by 2%, does it?
No, but there's one here that we did, that's recommended 2%.
I see.
I know we used to do the fire chiefs and some of the others,
All
the
right.
past few years anyway, we were doing.
I was taking a risk by
We
seeing
can
the
add
changes.
$23 to it now, and we can take it off later when the budget doesn't work, right?
It's going in my Bermuda fund.
Is it? I hope you like it, because if you have enough years of it, it'd be a one-way ticket.
It would be too.
And some food.
All right.
I guess I'd stay with my original statement then. Let's suggest an $1873 amount as a stipend.
I have no problem with that for budgeting.
Yeah.
I don't see why that's.
How did you come up with the $50 increase in your expenses? Is that gas?
On the expenses?
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, that's where the big expense is, yeah. That's gas. Mileage has been up considerably. There's a lot more traveling now than there used to be because, you know, you got different people, different animals. It's just been, you know, the wild animals have been, as everybody probably sees, skunks are out, bears are out, everything's out right now. And they're a little early, but usually around Groundhog Day, everything starts to move. And no different this year. So it'll be picking up.
Any other particular issues that you haven't brought us up to speed on?
Well, the only
Or
thing
you
I was
haven't
going to
mentioned?
mention is that Mary and I had talked about it, is on the revolving animal account. I think there's some ruling in there that says that right now we only have to keep on hand like 2,500 or something to that effect. We got to get that up, and we know the money is there at this point. We got to either get it on the ballot, however we got to do to get it up, because if something happens in this department, we're not going to survive on 2,500. We're not going to be able to handle it.
Well, I think the town meeting article, without any other further, you can grab that anytime, right? It's up to the animal control of that revolving
Well-
fund, makes that up to $2,500 available as needed.
The up to
and then-
2,500, and I think
But
what
that's-
Warren's talking about is wanting to increase that line.
Right, but that's just in the kitty, but isn't there some ruling there has to, you have to vote on it to get it?
There's a higher balance than that in the revolving fund. But
Right
you
now-
can, as animal control officer, you can only draw on $2,500 of that without another vote of the town. That's the way I understand that revolving fund.
Okay, so if this revolving fund grows, we don't have to worry about
It's
having legal,
It's not gonna disappear into the,
okay, then that's fine. because
you're gonna go to pay healthcare.
It's totally an insurance policy is what it is. That's exactly what it is.
But that doesn't mean that we couldn't get it in a fiscal year by just at a special town meeting saying, you know, we've had an extraordinary event with a herd of buffalo roaming through and it's taken a lot of time, right? And we could vote more money out of that account.
Yeah, I think you probably are, I mean, you talked about state regulations changing and having to get a real kennel or something. And I think, is that what you wanted, to have that little nest egg?
Yeah, I just didn't want to be in a position where if something happened, we had to say pull 4,000. I didn't want to be in a spot where they say, oh no, you can't do that. Or we have to go through a special something.
For 25.
You know, like I said, the biggest thing that, and we've talked about it before, and all of us, is a kennel. Okay, this is where, now right now, there's no laws on it. I mean, there's laws, but I mean, not that says the town has to spend X amount of dollars, okay, and have certain things. They would like to see it, but it's not law. And this is what I'm concerned with, and I've said this in the past, that if this comes down, then Ashfield's gonna have to either come up with a piece of land, we're gonna have to come up with some type of building. There's gonna be an expense there. And I just didn't want the licensing fees and all this stuff to thin air, and then if we have nothing, you know. Sure. It's strictly an insurance policy down the road.
How much is in that fund balance?
Yeah, here's our balance of the
I
dog
didn't
fund.
see it this.
It is currently at 11,161.
That's good. Let's keep it there, nice and quiet, but keep it right there. You know, we don't want to play with it.
And if you got needing more than $2,500, you'd want to be telling somebody about it. It'd be a big enough thing that you'd want to be telling somebody about it anyway, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
At a regionalization conference last fall, we heard claims of great efficiency or quality of care for dogs using some kind of a regional dog kennel that was down at Turner's Falls. Would a regional kennel ever make sense for a town like Ashfield? I mean, Turner's Falls seems like a long ways off to me.
Yeah, I'm part of that.
You are?
Myself, not the town.
Okay.
The situation there, well, there's a couple of things. It's a great thing because they're keeping the inmates busy. They've got a person that's the deputy sheriff that's, you know, taking over the whole thing. They've got a lot of donated time, a lot of donated expenses, and this is a great thing also. It's a good community thing. A lot of the towns joined it because their feeling was they didn't have a kennel. They didn't want to put up with a kennel. No more than the rest of us in half the brain would want to, but I still have one. Basically, you pick up a dog and you run it over. That's fine for a dog. What happens if you pick a cat up? What happens if you pick a raccoon up? What happens if you pick up a wound? Okay, it's useless. The building is, you know. And the second thing was that, you know, geologically, we're talking a 30-mile trip one way. Okay, to run somebody's dog over. 4 hours later, I got a phone call, and the guy says, hey, that's my dog. Oh, by the way, you got to go to Montague and pick your dog. Right away, it leaves a bad taste. Okay, and two, it's like you didn't take much time to find the owner. All right, and they're going to charge way up. We charge $3 a day. They're about 30 a day, if I remember correctly. I went to the meeting that they had, and I think they're up there. But they got to carry that place on. They've got to do it, keep it floating. That's right. So anyway, that was another reason I never came to Ashfield and said, okay, we'll put in our $200 a year, but most of the towns, they go by population. And I said, no. I said, no sense in doing it because we're never going to use it. I'm not going to run anything 30 miles one way.
Sure.
Unless, you know, I just had a dog for 9 days and finally found the owner after 9 days. And this is like, you know, law says 7 now. So conceivably at the end of 7 days, if it's over there, they put it right out to adoption in 7 days. That dog would have had a new owner.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is some problem with the, you know, but other than that, it's a great thing. It's a wonderful thing. I know Leslie Cruz, she's a deputy, and she is absolutely wonderful.
What if we were to regionalize a new kennel for ourselves up here in the hill towns?
Well, we tried that in Worthington back 15, 18 years ago, I guess, something like that. And what happened was, they'd get an animal in, it would take sick, or start to have kennel cough, something. And then they'd say, oh, it's yours, you take care of it. Oh, no, they want the town to pay. Okay? So pretty soon, there was no money coming in. So it shut down. You've got to have county help like is over here. I haven't said, we don't have that kind of dogs. If we didn't have the neuter spay program, which in Massachusetts is really working, okay? We don't have the litter of puppies like we used to have. We used to have tons of puppies and kittens. We don't have that anymore. And so the neuter spay program, so we don't have the amount of dogs getting swarmed into these kennels. And larger ones like Dakin down there, a few of these, you know, they kill them as quick as they get there. But when you read their little thing, they say, no kill kennel. They dust them quicker than you can shake a stick at down there because they don't have the room. They just don't have the room. And so that's why I like the way we do it, because at least we don't have a chance. You know?
We can't say that animal control in Ashfield is a budget breaker. Yeah.
I just like to say, when we got done with the class that I took, the whole premise from the state is, you can now go in and ask for all kinds of money for salary. You can get an operating budget, you can get a vehicle, you can get thousands of dollars worth of equipment, new equipment, extra equipment. I mean, every town needs 18 snares. I mean, this is really valuable in Ashfield. So that's when I said, we're going to keep everything just as it is. We're not going to go crazy and try to do just because the state says, oh, now you can get this and this because you're certified. You know, it's
18 snares, I don't know if I would feel safe walking the
isn't that
streets.
something? I
You gotta
can't
use them
believe how
on,
many
you get them, you gotta use them on something, right? Any other questions for Warren? Thanks for coming in, really appreciate it. Thanks for keeping us up to date,
Anytime, call me.
really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Warren. Thanks, Warren. Conservation Commission, how are you?
I'm fine.
Conservation Commission. Looks like it's the same as last year,
Well, we're asking for $40 more.
$40.
$40.
We put the heavy hitters on tonight.
Yeah.
So what are the big issues with the Conservation Commission? I mean, anything new and
Basically, no. We're working on our files, trying to clean those up a bit more, and get rid of the extra materials.
clean up the files so all the members of the commission know what's going on? Or?
Yeah, that too. So, but we still have hearings. We're increasing the application fee from $50 to $60 to cover the ads and the certified mailings.
Now that $60, remind me, does that go general fund or is that a revolving fund?
General fund. Yeah. So that's why we need the appropriation to cover the ads and the mailing fees.
I mean, how many permits are you asked in a typical year to?
Okay, 6 or 7.
Depending on who wants to do a little work or? Right, I mean, normally if it's something near a brook or.
Well, it's a combination. If you're going to do work in a resource area, you need a notice of And if you want to work in the buffer zone, it's a request determination of applicability. Buffer zone is 100 feet. Resource area.
You have a full commission?
We do. We have a very good cost.
Paulette, any questions for Lester?
The $40 are the dues?
Excuse me?
The $40 increase is at the dues? The
Well,
MACC
yes,
dues?
the dues have gone up.
That's,
The MACC wants some more money. We also increased the scribe $21.
Finance Committee, any questions for Lester on?
Did you say that the current fee is 60? Was that up from 50? Did I hear that right?
Yeah, it's right.
50
Per
now.
permit fees, 50 to 60.
Yes, we're changing it from $50 to $60 for either notice of intent or request for termination.
And the one cost increase that you're citing is $40 comes from the increase in the MACC dues.
MACC dues, yes, and an increase in the hours prescribed.
Okay. Tommy, anything, any more? You're, yeah, you're only 45% expended on this year's budget so far, so you don't, unless you get a real strike up this spring, you don't see that going over budget this year. If they're gonna do some work, at least keep it non-controversial, right? Stay away from the Conservation Commission at all costs, even the Conservation Commission says that. All right, well, thanks for coming in. Thank you very much. Next victim is Emergency Management Director. Doug?
I got one thing that's not an emergency manager, and that's the Blackboard Connect. I think you have a copy of that. That's going to stay the same as it has been. They have a contract with the government for 5 years. So next year it may go up, depends on how they come out with the government. As long as we can stay under the 200 households, we stay on the same price. And we're up now, we're up to, I think it's 194 households in Ashfield. So we're still under the 200.
Good night.
How, so the Blackboard you're talking about, that's only going to take care of households that have landlines? Or is that common sense?
Any household that has a telephone in it.
Cell phones too?
Cell phones too.
Right, cell
Cell
phones.
phones too.
Yes. And we can put in, I haven't had in call for it, but we can put it in, we can put it under the internet also. But I haven't done it.
That'd be good, since some of these people who don't have cell phone coverage at their house, and sometimes that's all they have. They don't have landlines.
There's quite a few, matter of fact, I just got one right now that is a cell phone. I'm not even sure where they live, and I've heard the name before, so.
So if you have a landline and say 2 cell phones in the house, that's 3 numbers.
It still just don't cost just that one.
One household, that was my question.
One household, no matter whether you got umpteen thousand cell phones, or it's just it's $1.99 per household per year.
Okay.
And you can have as many phone lines in that household.
And Doug, you say this is a fixed price as long as we stay under 200 households for how many years? 3 years?
I asked them that this time. They have a 5-year contract with the government. And 5 years, this will be our 5th year, and, 5 years since they've done it. So, we're all set for this year. And they're going to have to negotiate something next year with the government, and we hopefully we'll stay the same as long as we can stay under that 200 households.
So the 2486 figure here for the Blackboard Connect, that's good for fiscal year 2015, although it's conceivable the following year it might be negotiated upward?
It goes from, we have to do it now, but the contract goes from September to September. So it'll be good until September 2015, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'll be good until then, but I try to get it here instead of having to get a special town meeting in August or something to happen.
In September 2015, that'll be the fiscal year 16.
Right.
So we'll have to negotiate with the state.
Is that-
Is it negotiating with the state?
Federal government.
Federal government.
This company is just exactly the same thing as Enhanced 911. It's countrywide.
Now I see there's an entry here for an assistant manager, that's new?
Well, I asked the select board to get a younger person to get involved in the emergency manager. Everything is changing so much, and there's a lot to do. And I asked them to do that, and they agreed with me, and we asked Kyle Taylor to do it, and he's accepted it. And he's gone to a couple meetings. Matter of fact, he's going, well, next Tuesday night to the Tuesday afternoon. We have a quarterly emergency managers meeting in Ag 1, and I go to that every quarter, and Kyle's going with me on this one. It's mainly to know what to do. 10 years ago, the select board could say, could you be emergency manager? And sure, no problem. Nowadays, there's so much more to it. There's a web EOC that we had to get to know about. Kyle and I had to go to a meeting on that one to know what to do with that. And it's all paperwork. It's really no more calling up Massachusetts and say, okay, we're on a state of emergency now. We have paperwork now we've got to fill out and send it in. And it's got to be done right or they'll kick it back. You know, it's all this stuff that has to be done now. And so I asked the select board, and we put it as assistant manager. Some towns have got it down as a deputy emergency manager. But it's just something so that Kyle would get to know what's going on, so when I step down, they won't be going into it blind.
Deputy Kyle.
Is it working? Do you feel like you're not blind?
I'm not blind. Actually, I am.
No, but are you getting handled?
Oh, yeah.
Working with Doug?
Yeah.
There's one nice thing and one bad thing. The nice thing is that we haven't had an emergency since Kyle went on. So that he can't see actually what happens in the state of emergency. I mean, poor Paulette got stuck twice now in the communication center, so she knows what goes on. I mean, we can sit there and do nothing, and all of a sudden, excuse my language, all hell will break loose. And it's just that we haven't had nothing, thank God. Yeah. So it's that type of a situation. So as soon as he can and he feels comfortable, then I probably will step down. Because I'll be 76 in another couple of months.
But who's counting?
What's that?
But who's counting?
It's prime.
Me.
Yeah, lady, you're prime. Your wife is.
So Doug, technically, if you were away on vacation in someplace warm, and we get that big ice storm, then,
Call Kyle.
Kyle.
as you say, oh,
Kyle
Robert,
would do
who's
it,
gonna
but of course, as you know, Paul.
And you've got your book.
Yeah, he would. And the thing is, as you know, we have a great working community here.
Sure.
I mean, we got the police, we got the fire, we got the select board, and also people will come in and ask for help if they want help. So, I mean, it's really great to have the people here in Ashfield that will be with you. Yes, I know the emergency manager has the final say if it's in the state of emergency, but you don't have a final, I mean, you go through other people before you. I mean, when we evacuated Bunsen Avenue, we didn't tell the select board until after we'd done it. But because we felt, Tommy and I felt we didn't have time, which now we know we did, but at that time we didn't know it. So we just up and did it.
Would you view this assistant manager role one that is largely providing for, preparing for management succession to replace you, let's say, when you step down? Or do you see that as the sort of position that we ought to plan on having into the foreseeable future? If there's an emergency manager, let's say you step down, if Kyle's at that point willing and able to kind of come into your role, would we need to find somebody to replace Kyle as another assistant manager, or is this largely just kind of a, you know, temporary thing for a year or two until we get to a replacement of you, let's say?
Is it replacement or support position?
Well, I think it would be good if you had somebody else for support. Maybe not an assistant, but as I said, there's quite a few towns now that have what they call the deputy. That's, say if I am out, or gone somewhere, or if Kyle goes somewhere, then there is somebody else that the select board can fall back on if it comes to an emergency. And that way, like Kyle's name is in the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency's logbook. So if for some reason I wasn't here and we needed something from the emergency management, Kyle's name is there, so all he'd have to do was tell him who he was and there'd be no problem getting it. So it might be, you're right, it might be a situation that if we had two people's names in there, so that you don't have a hassle. There's the last time we had it, when I called for the Red Cross, I had to give my name, my password and all this to even get them to talk to me.
Listen to you, sure.
So it might be,
I think it's a good idea to have two people. You know, I always help to have two people to bounce things off of, anyways.
Well, there's no reason why somebody isn't able to feel that they can go to Bermuda
Yeah, sure.
if they want to.
I think it's a good idea. I don't know how you came up with the $300. Just pulled it out.
It's just enough, yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Any other questions for Doug? You've kept us up to date on pretty much all the goings on, and you're trying to, you get the information and then you have to share it.
I had a conference call here at 6 o'clock tonight about the storm coming in.
Oh, yeah.
And according to the Albany's weather forecast, they're saying up here in the Berkshires and us, it's between 12 and 16 inches of snow. Starting it. But yeah, and we'll get nothing. Today we weren't supposed to get anything and we ended up. So it's whatever we get, but that's what they put out. But we do have a conference call. There'll be another conference call tomorrow probably also that we go on to. So I mean, it's that part of it is where the expense is nothing because it's just a conference call. So I don't have to have a lot of money. I have to go somewhere for.
It's not much of an expense in Ashfield, but it's all the people that you're talking to on the conference call, it adds up to quite a bit of money.
Well, we don't have
somewhere along.
That's right, not our pocket. When you do those calls to us, do you also contact the school busing people who decide whether it's a snow day or not?
The school has, when I dial that number out, the number also is in the school. The program's got the school's number in it.
Oh, okay.
So it automatically will go there too.
So the people who make the decision about snow days.
Well, the snow days I don't get.
They don't take their decision from your information?
Oh, no. but I don't know where they get this, I have no idea where they get this. I don't do the snow no more, unless I know it's gonna be a blizzard or something. I did it once and I got 3 or 4 telephone calls. We live in New England, we don't need to do that, so I don't.
Well, you know, I kind of, you know, little snow doesn't bother me. Ice, you know, that should concern everyone. But, I think last week kind of convinced me that you really can't, that somebody has to do some planning and have some idea when you look at what happened in Atlanta. That they let so much traffic go all at one time and didn't realize, you know, what kind of condition the road would be in. I mean, that sounds to me like it was just a lack of planning, thinking that they're never going to have something like that.
Our principal at Sanderson will call me if they're having, like today I thought I would get a call, because I thought maybe the buses would go earlier. But they will call and say, okay, and I think he isn't here, but I think they call Tommy too. So Tom knows that the buses are gonna be going out with this kind of weather. There's nothing I can do about it.
Well, it's always Bunny who calls the school or not.
One question of the select board. Have you talked about the idea of having an assistant emergency manager?
We have not. This is the first time we had seen, well, no, we appointed the assistant emergency manager.
Oh, well.
But we had talked about it being a separate budget line item.
Okay. Okay.
So we've actually probably got like 6 months or 7 months.
But we
at no charge.
Take no charge. Always a good deal.
But I do agree with Janet. I think if Kyle took over for Doug, I think having somebody else, if nothing else, so there's another name there, because things are known to happen at the wrong time, people not in the right place, then it gets a little more difficult during the difficult time. So it's a good idea.
Yeah, I'm all for having a bench.
The backup concept's a good one. The thing I'm anticipating a little bit, and this may come in later tonight in our conversation, I've been approached by the Greening Committee about the concept of applying for a grant to have the town of Ashfield establish an energy manager, an energy conservation manager, if you like. And again, that's one of these ideas that has some surface appeal to it, but it's also one of those programs where you get 2-year funding from an outside source, like the state, or I'm not sure if it's the state or the feds actually, but it tapers off. You get less the second year than you got the first year, and then thereafter the town is expected to pick it up. And it's another one of these, you know, attractive offers, at least on the front end, but it's also the sort of thing that if I don't know that we can afford to populate, you know, our town with lots of different managers for all kinds of different things. We have a few managers who could do a variety of things that might make some good sense. And again, that's not to gainsay the virtues of this idea of an energy manager or even the emergency management. I'm just watching and mindful of, you know, how much we afford and have in terms of employee base and so on. That's all. I like the idea of a backup though.
I get every year, I just have to fill out paperwork. We get $2,000 from the Massachusetts Emergency Manager it's a grant, but it's a free grant. I mean, there's no match to it. But they do have a specific things you have to get. And we're kind of running out of what they have. I mean, it's mostly computers or laptops or printers. I mean, it's office stuff, not stuff that you could get. I did get, 2 years ago, I got what they call a shelter kit. That's on wheels. It's got 25 cots, 50 pillows, things like that, and it stays up to the school.
Yeah.
And this past year, I got a 6,500 watt generator, and it runs the whole firehouse and the office here on that. And it's more, so we got to get a hold of it. When we get some more money, we can plug in more here, because the generator does not even work. It doesn't even, when you plug everything in, you don't even hear it go boom. It just, so we can put a lot more into it. But I don't have the money yet so Robin can come down
Yeah, some of
and
those
swap the
grants
wires around.
are real specific on what you can get. But we have the same thing.
Right now, we've got the heat in there fully, Ann's office, Laura's office, and we can plug now, we know it, we can plug every computer in by a extension cord into one of those office places, but the heat in there is on with the generator.
I'm not following. You mean this generator has more capacity than we actually need, or that we need another generator to carry?
No. We had a 4,500 watt generator at the fire station.
Okay.
And I got the 6,500 so we could plug into here, because here, now, if we lose electricity, we lose the internet and telephone to the fire station. It's all in here now. So with the 6,500, it's running everything now here, but we do have
Some surplus.
off that generator to be able to plug some more stuff into it.
Oh.
And we'll never be able to plug that big furnace, I don't think, in down there, but if we can get all the office working fine, it would be great.
It won't be long, this furnace probably won't be.
Yeah. So, but it is there, it sits in the firehouse, and all we have to do is plug it in.
All right, Doug. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. You too, Kyle.
Deputy Captain.
All right. Police Department. Diane, how are you? How's the first month been?
Just to go back for one
Yes.
moment, when we talk about emergency manager, it's a stipend, not wages, right? The top line says wages, but it's stipend.
Can you do 2 more for David and Ricky?
Oh, thank you.
That's it. That's it.
Right, that came in that way, you'll see on the line and a question mark because I'm not clear on the statements.
Got it.
You okay with that?
Yeah, I like it. Because I had seen that. Here's yeah, she's doing it.
That's the sheet I have here. So bring us up to date on your first month, acting chief.
It's been actually very, very good. I'm very happy with how it's gone. The first I'd say the first week was a little nerve-wracking because I don't really know what I'm missing, so I don't know if I'm missing something.
Right.
But after that settled in, I think it's going very well.
You, have you had any candidates for reserve officers?
Yes, we just closed January 31st was the end of the application of the resume portion. This week I'm going to set up interviews. There's 3 of them or 4 of them that I would like to interview for that position.
And how many applicants do you have so far?
Approximately 10.
Oh, wow. And you're looking for somebody for just a couple shifts a week, really?
Right. Basically, I did have Chris Mattson start doing a little work with the school for a few extra hours. He's going to do the safety meetings along with me, and he's going to be doing a lot of community policing. He's already set up a time to go up there and sit with Emma.
That must have worked.
Yeah. to go through what they're looking from the police department up at the school. We want to make a bigger presence up there. Already sat in with a kindergarten class that's a little rambunctious.
I've also heard about that 6th grade class.
Yeah, sixth grade class. And the kindergarten teacher actually asked him to come in and sit for a little while with them. So that went well. They weren't as rambunctious.
I was gonna say, it sounds like a pretty rough 13 years if they were come sit in the kindergarten.
That's what they're thinking.
Good, good. So,
I think putting one more officer on, I was thinking 1 or 2, but it depends on the wages too. At least 1 officer and have him work Saturday during the day. So we have somebody on the weekend, day and night.
okay. So you're looking at the budget that we have for this fiscal year and trying to figure out how that's all going to work in.
Yes. The only issue I have with this year's budget as it's written is the part-timers, the reserves, how many hours they get. And I don't think we put a cushion in there for the fall festival. And I'm worried about being short.
Yeah, we did have a cushion in there.
Yeah, and then it got dropped down, as you can see, we're down to 24,752. And I believe that's only with the $17 an hour at 28 hours weekly. I don't think that's going to include the fall festival cushion. That's one thing I have to correct them.
What we really need to look at is what our budget balances are and what we can fit in there to do that.
Most of the stuff went, or a few things went down actually. The chief wages went down, the reserve wages went down. Total police department expenses went down by 12.17%.
So when we appointed Diane to acting chief, one of the things I brought up is that although it's always uncomfortable or, you never know if there's a right time to do anything, but one of the things I was thinking of, if we had to change police, this was not the worst time in the world to do that, because the finance committee and the select board together can kind of be thinking about, this probably will be the budget that we'll be most active in. I'm foreseeing, is just to kind of come up with an idea of what level of service and protection is practical, for our community, and financially, what we can handle. So I would hope that we'd have time to explore a lot of different options.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily see that there's a rush. I don't see any, a drop dead date as long as things are moving forward in a smooth manner.
Right.
And I'm not going to quiz you today, but the time will come on at some point on what do you feel is really necessary. It seems like the pendulum swings in both directions, and I'm not always satisfied where it is, and there's other people that would want more or less from there. But I did see this last week, I was in Greenfield, and I tripped upon Bob Dean, the selectman from Buckland, and I asked him about if he thought Buckland would be interested in a regional police situation. And he said he certainly thinks it would be worth visiting with, and he believed the rest of his board would also. So, and from the meeting that Ted, you and Mary went to Worcester?
Yeah, regionalization conference.
They pretty much told you that there would be money available, or or that they thought that that's where the funding would be directed?
Their comment was that in future, they were quite confident that most of monies, grants and so on would flow toward regional approaches to things. They didn't specify exactly, but that seemed to be the pretty clear signal. They talked about the dog pound, for example, this kind of regional dog pound that I scored with Warren there a moment ago, is of that nature. They didn't explicitly say police departments or police work, but it's the kind of thing which you can certainly see the state has been advocating in schools. And I'm not sure the school system is the best model of all our experiences, but it's the sort of thing that you can see where governments have to try to work out more cooperative resource sharing approaches. So it's the kind of thing that I think you can probably get some support for.
I mean, one of the other things, personally, I think it's something we should at least explore. If it's not going to work, at least we'd have some information and a background to say that it can't work or it won't work. Certainly, you couldn't come up with the most perfect plan, and politically, it wouldn't work.
Right.
But from a practical standpoint, I think that's one of the things that I'd like to spend some time looking into. So I am wondering how to proceed on this. Yes.
One thing I'd like to say, it was great that Chief Wilder put this together, the numbers, you know, they all look good. But my concern is that, you know, we're looking at starting a new budget 5 months from now, and then we're going to need to have kind of the idea of what we're doing with a chief and stuff in place before we can even put a, you know, budget in place. You know, are we going to have a full-time or regional or whatever, and, you know, before we can even touch the numbers, I would think. Have a better idea.
I have a question. The wages at $17 an hour, is that the 2%, or is that some different number?
I believe that's the 2%.
So from wherever it is today, 2% gets it to 17. Because I think we just want to be consistent.
I think it's 1680 or 1685,
Okay.
somewhere.
I just didn't remember the exact.
So,
I agree with Tom. Without knowing what we're going to do for a police chief or for the part-timers, like if you go with a full-time chief and I'm not there or whatever, that drops me back into the reserve wages, and then there's not enough for that, and then a full-time chief for 41.6, I don't think that's enough.
Well, I interpret this as follows. I don't know if this is what you have in mind, but it says to me that if we haven't got a different game plan by the time we come to the budget at the annual town meeting, and we conclude that for the time being we're going to stay with this configuration, then it seems to me what you're proposing is appropriate. Because we don't know for a fact whether it's a full-time chief, a part-time chief, regional approach. I don't think we could put something regional together in that short period of time. And I don't think we can even recruit a full-time chief if that's what, you know, if we all decided tonight we want a full-time chief, I don't think we could have him or her by then. So all this, I think, is predicated on the notion that this is kind of, for the time being, a holding action, which we should recognize budgetarily, you know, maybe a totally unrealistic set of numbers. By October of this year, we might conclude we really want a chief and we're willing to pay $85,000 for somebody who's gold-plated and who knows what. Not all of us would agree to that. But I mean, you know, it could be markedly different. It could be markedly different.
I had something after you were appointed that if we're going in the direction, Chief Wilder, I would like to see us have money in the budget to help to make sure you get to the full-time academy, to supply some finances, if that's the direction we're going to go. that's another option, but I wouldn't want to leave that off the table, make the decision, and we go, oops, we forgot the money.
I mean-
Because I think that's important.
Yeah, the training budget here, if it were to entail also funding full-time academy for Officer Wilder, then you might increase that by, some thousands of dollars or something.
Right.
But I think that's a perfectly legitimate thing to say, let's hold on that and figure out what we're going to do about that. My questions come this way. Stay with this configuration for a moment. Same question, I think, Paulette, and I'm sorry I wasn't following closely. I was trying to think of something else. Is the $17 an hour a 2% increase from what we're now paying to reservists?
Yes.
Okay. And is a $25 an hour, how is that? Is that a 2% increase of something?
That's
More than 2%.
Current rate is $24.
24. All right. So that, now, okay, so that helps. Let me go to the hours for a moment. 32 hours of a chief and 28 hours of reservists is a total of 60 hours. And I believe when we budgeted last year, we were looking at some 72 hours. 40 hours of chief plus 32 hours of reservists. Technically, we're scaling back the number of hours coverage. Is that going to be okay?
I think what's happened is the shift configuration is changing. So you're actually going to end up with more coverage because my hours were mostly during the week and the chief was here also.
Yes.
And I'm not doing that. Other than Chris Mattson having to go to the school for 4 to 6 hours a week, I'm doing it. I want more coverage on the weekends. Say a whole shift Saturday, and of course during the summer you're going to want a shift during the summer on Sunday. And instead of doubling up during the week, I want to move it to the weekend.
Because last year the argument was we wanted more hours
Right.
budgeted. And I think we resisted that.
Mm-hmm.
But there were clearly some overlapping.
The doubling up was that the chief was here and
Yes.
and a patrolman,
But to the extent
Diane was here,
Yeah.
doing patrols at the same time on a great many days.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that the reduced number of hours looks to you, so that's going to still work out in terms of shift coverage and
Yeah.
so on.
Sounds to me like it's better shift coverage, and more days.
Yeah, it's good.
But it was here.
We need an energy manager.
Seems to remember,
Did you just say 40 hours and 28?
Last year was 40 hours and 32.
40 hours of the chief's time and 32 hours of reservist time.
What's the
Total
next
72,
one?
and I think they wanted
This year is-
77.
Yeah, what's
Is
this year?
32 and 28. It's going down 12 hours.
As far as the topic on the budget, as far as going through, I think we can kind of come up with a plan and understand until politically we get to the point where we can nail everything down and figure out what level of service. I think as long as you get up at town meeting and say that, this portion of the budget really is maybe a little bit more than the rest of the budget, living and breathing, that we're working our way through this to manage it what's best for the town. And I don't believe anybody would have a problem with that.
I don't think so. We have to explain ourselves on this, but the other thing I want to make sure we've got covered in here, you have, if I understand correctly, Betty LaShure doing some administrative work in-house. Is that reflected in this budget?
No, she's a stipend, I think.
No, you've got
Firearms
her
clerk stipend.
administrative,
Oh, okay.
right? $14 an hour.
I would have to look at this closer to find out.
So
I
we
have to
should
check the
think that
numbers.
this budget needs to be augmented by that amount.
Right.
I was going to say, is the firearms clerk stipend in this budget?
that's a
No.
separate line item.
It's a separate line item, but I know there's separate line items that are included
But
in
it
this.
was deliberately not included in the police department budget last year, if you
Okay,
recall.
so where we,
It sits all by itself,
okay.
and the
Okay.
board did that deliberately, I think.
And drug and alcohol testing has been taken off. Is that also,
No, I just don't have a number for that yet, in case it's gone up.
so should those two things be included in this budget?
I think we deliberately did not put the firearms stipend in the police department budget last year. We deliberately put it separate, if I recall. So it stood alone.
Is there a reason for doing that?
I think we didn't roll it into the police department budget. There was a lot of discussion about the budget, but we discussed having the stipend for Betty.
And it was
And
good.
it didn't-
And stipends usually stand alone.
Oh, you know what, it wasn't during
was
town
good.
meeting,
Yeah,
it was
for
later on in the year.
Yeah,
And we didn't want to
And
finish
it
this
was-
budget balloon that.
Right, okay.
I do have a concern. One other way to do this budget would be to pretend that we were with a full-time chief and things were sort of status quo and have it all laid out, which means you could end up using less because you go with the model we're in, but you would have more money set aside. So if you're going with a full-time chief, I think it might change things in terms of going back to a special town meeting and saying, oh dear, now we've made a decision and yeah, well, it wasn't in the annual budget. I'm just wondering if it might be better to budget as if it was full-time,
I think that kind of
which
limits,
would show you sort of a more maximum amount of money than to show a smaller amount and then go back and say, oops, you know, I don't know. It's just another way of looking at it. Budget.
I was just gonna say, I agree, but I think like Tom was saying, we've got 2 months of, politically trying to figure out where we want to go, and, hopefully by April 1st, we can have a much better idea.
And I think even more important than politically is to come up with a practical plan, Diane has an idea here, and it's the first idea that we're looking at. There could be several of them, but, on how much coverage. And then when you really apply it, I think you brought up a really good point, Diane, is that seasonally, coverage changes. July and August coverage would be much different than October, November, or November, December.
Right.
In my mind, I can see
Right.
that.
Summer hours, we need somebody here on Sundays. It's almost mandatory because of the crowds and the beach and the lake house and motorcycles.
So I think if we were going to, to further explore this model that you have, which is probably an exercise that hasn't been done, is to take the calendar out and say, this is what we really think we need. And some weeks you'll have 30 hours of coverage, and some weeks you might have 50 hours of coverage.
We definitely don't need that much coverage during the winter time.
Right.
I'm attracted conceptually to the idea of taking the double coverage that we had before and kind of pulling that apart so that with fewer hours, you in effect get literally more coverage, albeit with a single officer, not 2 at one time. But again, I like the concept too of having Diane work with us for a period of time and kind of coming back and saying, this didn't work as well as I thought, or it works better than I thought, we can do this, tweak it seasonally, some other things like that. That would inform, it seems to me, building then of a more permanent budget once we're a little clear on whether we're going to go with part-time, full-time, shared, chief, whatever you think about.
it should help us decide.
I think so.
Which way. I like the idea of this as a base. It's safe, it's current, we have all options still open. If we gear ourselves towards, having more money for a full-time chief, I think that kind of gets us stuck in a rut and doesn't let us look outside the box that we might need here in town.
The other question I had is, I'm thinking back to last year, has to do with training and ammunition. And I seem to recall that last year the chief thought perhaps those were a little on the short side. And I know you've added a little bit to it. I'm going to guess you're being conservative. Are they really sufficient, do you think? And I know it's easy to spend more money, but do they need another $100? Are you really, because you're talking about a couple of new people.
I would like to see the training up a little more than what it is. The ammunition, I think, will work. We're currently set for ammunition for the spring qualifying with the guns. As far as the ammunition, I'd have to check into those numbers and see if we needed
More training or more?
more in the line item of the ammunition.
I remember last year in the discussions, I believe I recall, is that we had the discussion about training, and to our advantage or disadvantage, I'm thinking it's to our advantage financially, is since we use so many reserve officers that work in other communities, that some of the other communities are footing for some of their training, and we're footing for some training for some of the other communities.
Right, like my husband Charlie, we have in-service training coming up. One year he'll go with Ashfield, and the next year he'll go with Buckland, so that he gets it and it's not always footed on one town. One of the officers that I'm considering as a new part-time officer, he's in another town close by. I'm sure he'll do the same thing instead of putting the weight all on one community.
And uniforms is the other one I'm wondering.
Uniforms, I don't feel is up to par. If I'm bringing in one more officer, about $150 to $200 to put a uniform on an officer. Short sleeves, long sleeves, and pants. And the name tags, that's about what it costs to buy just a standard uniform without any of the patches attached or anything.
And do we supply the pistols, etc., or do they bring their own?
We have weapons downstairs.
And so that's sufficient in terms of, if
For
that's
one more
equipment?
officer. We have one more weapon for one more officer.
And then we'd have to get another one.
If we hire two.
And that's probably in the vicinity of $500-ish or more?
Probably a little more than that. I haven't priced them, honestly.
So is that one okay, the equipment, if the equipment is where the weapon comes from?
I think that would need to be, to price the weapon and the uniform for one more officer.
That would be adequate. Yeah.
And is that what you're looking at hiring, possibly one more officer?
One or two, and I'm leaning towards one right now. It depends on, like I said, on the hours for the 28 hours weekly. I can't get one more officer, but when or two officers. But when summer rolls around, I'm going to want that other officer, that second officer. So it depends on what we do with the wages.
I think quite a bit of it is going to be, to have an officer, you're going to have enough hours for him to show up.
Exactly.
Well, thus saving the money on the chief's salary, I mean, could we go up with a little bit more in the training, and so there's room to do two officers? Because town meeting's in May, we've got summertime.
You know, that's when the budget's going to start, right? 1st of July.
Yeah, and I mean, we're saving almost 15,000 on the chief's salary.
See,
Could we give enough money to do possibly two officers? Not that you have to get them right now, but to give that leeway for the summertime, so that it doesn't have to come back right after town meeting.
Currently, with the officers we have no room for somebody to be sick or without needing the shift open. My husband will sometimes jump in when he can, but he also works in two other departments too. So with a couple extra guys, they can swap shifts, they can have a little more freedom of movement there instead of
A little flexibility.
every single Saturday, the same officers on every single Saturday.
Well, if you took something like, just looking at the fiscal year 15 proposed and allowing for a little bit more breathing room here from what Diane said, you could take training up $200 and make that $700. You could take uniforms up another $100, make that $700. You could take equipment up another 200 to 1,200, you come out with $40,052 for police department expenses. So you basically introduced another $500, which, although those aren't necessarily the very places you'd spend it, because these are funds that are fungible within that department expense line.
Yeah.
You can ship these things around within those things.
Right.
That would seem to me to provide a modest amount of give in the finances there.
Yeah.
And you're still then reporting a nice significant $5,000 reduction in your police department expenses.
Yeah.
You're showing a reduced chief salary. You're showing a reduced set of reserve wages. And it's, I think, admittedly, a bit of an experimentation to see how this configuration works out. And if we haven't made critical choices by the time we come to annual town meeting, then this is kind of a blueprint for going forward. It's conceivable, as we've done in the past, that there might be a special town meeting we have to pull together and say, we're at the point of modifying some of these departmental expenses because they're inadequate, we didn't budget sufficiently, or we're at a point where we're going to make a decision about a chief, and it's going to be a full-time chief. And going back to your earlier point, Paul, that even if we put in, let's say, a chief salary of $56,000 or $60,000, by the time we got to negotiations, we probably have to go back and tweak that number again and say, you know, it's going to be 62, it's going to be 58, or whatever the number might be. So I think we'd inevitably have another special town meeting, regardless of how we've kind of structured this now.
What I was thinking more of is like when you're at the annual town meeting, you could feel that you thought the expense was going down and going to stay. I don't know if maybe another idea would be to have somewhere an item that's like a reserve amount in anticipation of police department expenses, but it sits out of the budget, but we know we're going to do something. If we don't do anything, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if we're going to do something, because otherwise it looks like you think you've got this decrease coming, and we don't really know that we're going to have that. So it's like, I like to see it there at the time we're doing the annual town meeting.
Like a contingency fund of some kind?
Identifying that we know we've got an unknown and we're assigning a dollar value to it as best we can.
Well, isn't that what our extra reserve funds are?
And over the course of the year, if we haven't figured it out by May, it will be figured out before the next May, hopefully.
Yeah, right, before the end of the next.
Well, it may mean that then, I don't know if it means you wouldn't need a special town meeting, but it would mean you wouldn't be looking for the money. You would have it sitting there to be able to do something with, as opposed to saying, oh, where are we going to get that from?
Well, couldn't, we always leave stuff in stabilization of free cash anyways. I mean, isn't that what that account could be used for?
Well, I think, Paul, that's talking about having
something earmarked.
A line item that we kind of put a pool of money there, label it something, but it's kind of a contingency fund for addressing further police funding needs. We'd have to somehow qualify that and explain what that's for.
Explain to the town.
Otherwise, it looks like a slush fund. You can't have that.
And then people are going to say, why don't
I
you
guess
just
I
use
would,
this one?
I would have a hard time supporting something like that, because if you set something aside, you'd be amazed at the things
People
that
are going to think
somebody
you've got
could
something
make
in
a
mind.
very good case to spend it on.
And also people are going to say, oh, you guys have something in mind already.
I mean, my calculator's gone dead, and I do not think that the budget that Diane has here, you know, the doorknobs are far from polished on it.
Right, I understand.
Okay, I mean, we can work through that, and we can do that, and how much different it will look, I'm not exactly sure. But what we've got here is the final budget last year was $106,217.
Yeah.
Is that right? And what's proposed here now is $86,852.
Yeah.
Which is significant. And what I keep thinking about is town meeting last year. And that the town really had no problem following the finance committee's lead by peeling an extra $5,000 or whatever that amount of money was off of the budget.
I think the Selectboard had trouble. It wasn't the town meeting, it was the Selectboard had trouble.
With what?
Our recommendation is
Well, I-
different from yours.
Yeah, that's all right, that's what you're here for.
No,
But no, I mean,
think
I was
we're-
amazed at how little discussion there was in that.
No, I
We
understand.
wanted more discussion. I remember that.
Well,
I mean, they
Yeah.
found a way pretty quick to spend it.
Yeah?
Are you suggesting maybe we just leave what Diane's presented here as is and not try to fiddle around with a couple $100 here and there? Just recognize we're gonna come back to this later in the budget discussions?
Oh, I think we're gonna come back to it often.
Yeah,
I mean, I think this is I don't think this is a bad blueprint to start with. And like I said, I think one of the exercises, and hopefully we can set some hours aside, or maybe you and Mary could start on it. I'd love you to take the calendar and go through and figure out, well, you know, I do need an extra shift. You know,
Yeah.
hey, how many extra shifts do you need 4th of July weekend?
Right.
You know, 4th of July, Labor Day, you know, and kind of fill that stuff in. And just see how many different hours. It may come out to be less hours than what you figured.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, how many extra hours, shifts do you need in November?
Yeah.
I still like the idea of her planning on having room for 2 officers instead of just one in the budget.
To equip them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wait, that's one more, not a total of one.
They're 2 total,
2.
instead of 1. They're planning on,
Well, remember, you've got one officer.
Already?
We you know, without the chief, I mean, bringing one is going to bring us up to the same number as what we had before Chief Droney resigned. One will bring you up to the same number that we had.
oh, okay.
So the second one is to give some flexibility.
Right.
And Diane's model, if I don't, let me put words in your mouth, but your model is that you're not going to have those double shifts,
Right.
spending all day in the office.
Yeah.
So the one you're thinking of hiring would make it up to the 3 total. You and 2 officers. Am I
Right,
understanding
the one
right?
that replaces me,
Yeah.
myself, and the extra one.
Okay. So that
See,
still would be 3.
See, I'm having trouble with hiring 2, not because I don't think it would be great flexibility-wise. I think you gotta find the right candidate that would be willing, actually, you probably have to look for 2 candidates that would be willing to
Share it out.
do so few hours.
Well, that's really not that big of a problem, because most of all the part-time officers or the reserve officers have full-time jobs, and they don't want to work that many hours. Some of the officers only want to work 1 day a month.
Wow.
So,
She got up to 10 applications, you said?
Yes.
So you'll know if you get one or more good candidates that you would like to have available. I think it makes sense to have the extra one. Like you said,
I do,
it's
because
not like they're doing
sometimes-
40 hours a week.
No,
Summertime's
Small
gonna come
numbers.
through, we're gonna need.
And in the winter,
Here and there.
they, depending where you live, you might not want to be traveling so far, so if somebody wants to take that, it's a long way to drive
and you wouldn't be
for 4 hours.
you wouldn't be particularly concerned about somebody working short number of shifts and short hours in a month and paying, let's just say, $1,000 to get them set up.
Am I?
Yeah.
No, not that much. I'd rather have they need the flexibility. You can't be full tilt all the time. Everybody's got to be at the right place at the right time and you have nothing. That's sort of the little bit of extra expense is to make sure you can have the coverage in most cases when somebody has to be out. Because it might occur at the wrong time.
right.
And then you're saying, oh, that was a silly decision.
That's what I
We
was.
would need bringing the outside officers on for fall festival also.
So, okay, that would be.
So in light of what I suggested earlier, is that allow sufficient, some of the $500 in the police department expenses spread roughly that way? Does that help, Dan?
Yes.
I didn't follow all your numbers.
Yep, if you go back up to the training,
Yep.
this is fiscal year 15 proposed. Instead of 500, make that 700.
Yep.
It's adding 200. Instead of uniforms at 600, make that 700, that's another 100. And then you come down to the equipment, make that another $200, so that's 1,200. And thereby the column total, instead of 39,552, would now be $40,052. It's not huge, it's $500 more. She could spread it that way or some other way, frankly. But it's a gesture in the direction of better supporting the bringing on of additional staffing as needed. It's not one officer, it's not two officers, it's probably somewhere in between, but it might be beneficial. And again, I think this is, in some sense, kind of the first iteration, or a first shot at what we're going to be doing here. Might get further adjusted in our budget discussions.
So could we all agree that within the next month,
Yeah.
that we come back after we've put it together and kind of polished it up and see what it looks like as comparison to this? And
That'd be good.
you know, these ideas that we've been kicking around, and it may be a little bit more, it may be a little bit less, but at least we have a blueprint. Does that make sense?
So that would be the night of February 29th or something. No, a month?
Well, in a month, roughly a month. It'll be on the agenda.
March 3rd.
Yeah, February and March copy each other.
The only other thing I wanted to mention was community policing, the last line there. We added that in, we didn't have that last year. I do want to step up a lot more community policing this year. I'm for that whole hog, and we don't have anything to buy supplies with. Poster boards to make signs for things, even markers or prizes for the kids for their bike rodeo. We have nothing for that, other than a lot of volunteer stuff and get out of my pocket. So I wanted to start a new line as a community policing line.
Okay.
And a firearms clerk, we're going to budget that as a separate stipend elsewhere. But it'll be a bigger number because we're now going to more hours, is that right?
No.
We're separate.
We're separate. She's getting,
I was
right,
confused.
The separate line,
and that's in this budget.
No, yeah, she'll have to, hers will have to come out here. For
But
the
it isn't
administrative.
yet.
Right now,
Yes.
we're charging it to police department expenses, which really, is the total number. Right? What's voted is police department expenses.
Right?
And so it's up to 6 hours a week, and we're not using anywhere near that yet at a rate of $14 an hour.
I'm confused.
I know.
Is firearms clerk going to show up elsewhere in the budget lines?
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Two different things, it just happens to be the same person.
Got it.
Right.
So,
it's
but
not gonna
now
be
she is
three-
doing a administrative job for the police department.
And that shows up somewhere in reserve wages?
Well, yes. Well, it's going to show up. I mean, right now it's being charged out of total police department expenses, because that's the line that we're voting.
All right.
But she said she didn't factor it into
Yeah.
these
Yeah, it's not in
budget
here.
numbers yet.
I don't think it's factored in here.
Right.
It's not.
No, but that's what I'm telling you, that's where it's charged right
Yeah.
now. That's all I'm saying, is that it's not factored in. We don't even know how many hours it's going to end up being.
So in a month's time, Diane will come back with this budget modified to reflect that administrative work, 6 hours or whatever.
Or whatever
Yeah,
it
yeah.
turns out to be.
Got it, but it's not yet in here.
No.
Perfect. And the firearms clerk will be held outside as another stipend. And what's going to appear in here will be wages or stipend? Wages. Thank you.
You want to ask that stipend question for the firearms clerk one more time?
No, I think I'll stop.
Well, because I see something here.
I'm waiting for it, you know.
Stop while I'm
Oh, go ahead, Ted, ask his.
So the wages
Just
is
quick
14
question. Will that administrative, do you see that staying at 6 hours?
Yes, at the moment. I think
At the
that's
moment, but
sufficient.
you
We're
think-
not even working up to 6 at this point. It's only like a couple hours a week.
So she
Okay.
gets the 300 stipend,
That's for
and
fire.
then the wages,
And then every hour she works, she gets $14.
okay.
I'm gonna start talking, calling you, okay.
Well, and just quick figures, 14 times 6 times 50 weeks, that would be over $4,000
Yeah,
towards that.
yeah, so it has to show up in something.
Yeah.
It is just a coincidence, it's the same person. Could be two
That's
different
okay,
people.
that's okay.
Anything else for Chief Wilder? Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll get together.
Yes, sir.
You got pretty good notes on that, so Diane has time there.
So she's thinking 14 hours.
6 hours.
Oh, 6 hours.
6 hours, $50.
6 hours. That's 50 weeks.
Almost, you have 10 minutes.
What's that?
10 minutes, Jen.
Out of victims, right, out of victims tonight.
No more victims.
Almost
6 hours. Times 50 weeks.
Did parking go down? Did the carpet go down? Did the carpet go down?
Oh, yeah.
I hope so. Right now, it's basically, it's just administrative, it's not fire and wages.
Firearms clerk will be somewhere else for 3 years.
Just the stipend.
Well, she's here on this slide.
Yeah, I got you.
You have the 300 there.
Right, you can't be answering
It's not supposed to
the
be.
tally and the payroll at the same time.
It's not supposed to be.
Right.
All right.
Special town meeting.
Well, this is just whoever be done.
No, we're not,
It's not.
Oh, all right.
yeah, we're getting
that?
It's gonna fill it.
Look,
If there's a point where we are discussing the general budget overview, can we talk about a couple of things, like stipends and whether there's a governing principle, so as I go through the check this map, where it applies and where it doesn't. Another question I have is, you may remember we changed the budget worksheet partway through last year, made it landscape, changed some of the columns that were there. In previous years, we had a FC recommendation column, SB recommendation column. We don't have those now, so I'd like some guidance on how to handle. For example, tonight Ted had the suggestion about a police department adjustment. It was very specific. Should I plug that in worksheet to worksheet? In previous budget worksheets, I would have put that on the select board budget. I don't know if you all remember, it used to have, say, FY15 request, FY15 select board, FY15 finance committee. We have other things on here now, we don't have that. So if I'm going to carry those numbers forward, how do I know when to make a change to a budget that you have gone over?
well, my feeling is that this has been general discussion about the police department budget, and since we're going to revisit it in a month, those may be the numbers that we'll plug in. We'll agree or not agree to plug in at that point.
So I won't make a change now, we'll just keep track of that information along with the budget, and then when we discuss it.
I also think, reflecting back on past times, it's not that we're going to agree in every instance. I can imagine there'll be a handful, but probably only a handful of numbers we would, as a finance committee, take exception to. And rather than write a whole column, which are kind of duplicate numbers, say for 1 or 2 figures here and there, we will at the end of all this stuff, after a month and a half of this, we're going to go off in a corner and we're going to vote on all those different, line items in such a way that, in the end, the 4 or 5 different numbers we have, we'll simply introduce at town meeting. Not to surprise you, you'll know ahead of time what we're going to differ on. But I think that's sufficient. And I think therefore, just to keep it a little simpler, say the select board recommendations are these. And presumably, the finance committee will be supportive based on all these kinds of interactive discussions, except for a handful. And then we'll kind of bring those up at annual town meeting and say, these are things we think are different. It should be more, it should be less for these reasons. And we kind of vote.
All right.
Is that okay?
That sounds fine, and I don't, we may decide that there's a lot of places we don't agree, and we may change the rules at that point.
Yeah, I think so.
But
So then I won't change the numbers you see 1 week to the next unless or until we have a specific vote and it changes.
Right, and I think after,
Even if everybody's agreed on that.
after a few meetings, I have an idea what
Looking at the fire department, with the expenses and utilities that got broken out last year that wasn't the year before, we probably want to be careful to roll that back up.
Should you change that number?
So that number would not show as 2 numbers. It would show as 1, and utilities would go away because they'd roll into the overall expenses.
Into expenses.
And we, yeah,
If you want
like
to.
it was 2 years ago.
And the whole reason was to do that.
Right. And it was just an accident that they ended up like this last year.
So should I put those together now for the next budget?
Works for me.
That's fine.
So that there would be 0 there for utilities and we wouldn't carry it forward.
I mean, what I really see, unless somebody has a real problem with it and can convince me that it's a problem, is that we're probably going to get down the road at some point and at a selectmen's meeting, not necessarily a budget meeting, some of the things that we've discussed together as a select board, we'll pick out those accounts and say, this is the number that we want to go forward to.
Right.
And those will become the concrete number, and then you can decide if you agree or disagree. But on most of these, I think we're probably going to discuss them.
Well, that's what I was wondering on the animal control salary. We all agreed to pop that up to 2%, so the new 1873 number should be in the department request.
I'd agree.
Well, and can I or we get a guiding principle on stipends, because it has varied some over time. Usually stipends haven't gone up, but there have been exceptions.
I think we that should be one of our little leeways, because we don't take it for the finance, the stipend. Those are something that is like gray area that we can play with. Wages, 2% across the board. But I don't know about something.
Well, in stipends, we've typically kept those at kind of a round number, oftentimes $500, $200, $300. And then after a long time, somebody says, you know, I think the stipend for this role should be not $300 or $400.
And last year you changed a number of them.
Well, the fire department, that's technically a stipend. That went way up to $7,500 from, I don't know what it was before, 5,000 or something. Yeah, it was much different. Yeah, I'm not sure how to proceed.
And so when
I think we got to have a better definition of what a stipend is. I think we spent a lot of time discussing stipends last year, and yet never really had a definition on what they are or what we expect them to be. You know, oh, are they wages, are they stipends? Hey, in my mind, a stipend is something you set it at, and it's there. It's not rewarding you for the time you spend. It's an honor to serve the community, and this is something that the community can show them. But we spend a lot of time discussing that, and I think we just have to make a decision on if stipend means anything. Either it means something or it means nothing. And I'm good either way, but we spend a lot of time discussing it.
It seems to me it's usually,
What's the
it's
actual
not
definition
an
of
hourly wage.
No,
It's not related to an hourly wage, but it's some amount of money for effort.
it's kind of a token, really, when you get right down to it.
And that's why
And
traditionally
stipend.
they didn't all go up with
At a
each
certain
adjustment.
amount.
Right.
And then some started somehow, one by one, getting in that way. Right now, what you see in your budget is what I get from someone. If they put it in, I show it because that's what they do. If they didn't, I don't.
Yeah, because emergency manager went up 2%.
But it's
a
because if I knew that stipends don't, I would have backed that out. If I knew that stipends do, I would have added it where it wasn't correct or wasn't in. But I don't really know what to do with those.
Gives us something to discuss.
Can we come back to
Well,
the
we've
next
got-
meeting with some kind of a decision?
Yeah, I think that would be fine. And I think the thing you gotta remember is how much different we would think about some of these things if there was only 122,000 in free cash instead of 322 in free cash.
Yeah, you're right.
And as far as just agreeing that animal control is gonna be up that much, not that I have a problem with it, not that I have a problem with it in the least, is that at the end of the budget, and we've gotta get everything into a box, people will talk about the little numbers a lot quicker than they're gonna talk about the school budget.
Oh, it's not too far in my memory where we were taking all those little numbers out.
Exactly. So that's why I'm not really quick. I mean, I think it's great that we discuss them, but I'm not really quick to etch them in stone.
So for the animal control salary, should we go back to
But
what?
That gives no real guidance to me.
It doesn't have any real guidance.
Sorry, Mary.
No, but doesn't it just mean that as we do the stipends, we'll decide as we go along?
But shouldn't there be a principle for stipends so that we know how a stipend
Yeah, I'm
functions?
inclined to think if we agree, we all agree that stipends are kind of an honorific token of some kind, I'd say they all have to end with a 50 or a 0 and not get into this 2%, 3% adjustment.
I mean, for when they
Twitching them around too
And leave
much.
them the same for the year unless there's
Some
some
big,
sort of egregious where we need to.
Here's what we'll do.
Okay.
Are you gonna be at the next budget meeting, or are you gonna be gone?
no, I'd like to be gone, but I'll be there.
Why don't we,
Yeah.
Mary,
Mhm.
you can generate a list of everything that is a stipend.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And then we will look at it and hopefully in one night, and we can email it out before, so people can get their ideas down, and we can go through and say, this is what it's gonna be, and all those line items, we can take care of at one time.
Fixed.
How's
Good
that?
idea.
How's that?
That helps.
That's a
plan.
course of action. Does that help you, Mary?
That sounds great.
The only difficulty will be that you want to make an adjustment, and if you're a very small stipend and you add $50, somebody would say that's a big percent versus a big number, and you just do $50 and it's a smaller percent.
Right.
So, right.
That's
So
the risk.
if you're going to do it that way, then you have to, for stipends, you have to forget about percentages or it'll drive you
Mhm.
crazy.
Right.
Yeah, because we don't need to spend as much time talking about it as we did. I thought we adjusted them last year.
We adjusted some.
Mhm.
Like we did, I think we left the select board and the assessors and some of them
Yep.
the same, and then we changed some others.
I think the only one we changed, I thought was the fire department.
That sounds like a good plan.
I think
Or
that's,
Betty.
that'll help. That should
I
bring
can,
us
I
up
can
to.
send this to when I send the new list. The ones we adjusted last year, firearms clerk, because it wasn't there before, school committee, town hall steward, board of health, and fire chief.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah,
are
and
adjusted.
history, and then any of the other ones that are on there, and we can handle them.
I think
Hopefully.
that'll help
All at
clarify.
one.
Huh? Good
But
idea.
you've got another one, you've got the tree warden. Did you have that on your list, Mary?
No, I'm saying there are plenty of others. These are the ones that we adjusted.
Might not be a
Sorry.
stipend. Oh, yeah, it is.
It says it.
It says
I mean, this is a perfect example at town meeting why we talk about the little numbers and don't spend so much time on the big ones. Before we move on, I know it's 9 o'clock. Do you want to spend a few minutes just going over the last page of the budget spreadsheet?
Yes, I think so.
Now,
It might be well for us to kind of review how that's assembled again. I always struggle with this a little bit, but isn't, most of our attention should be over in the left-hand columns here as to
that's correct.
how we got the money for our appropriations in fiscal 15, or 14.
Right, so that fiscal year 14 levy limit,
Yes.
okay, so that's the maximum amount that we could raise from taxation.
Right.
Now,
And then
my memory is failing me just a bit, because when we had the tax rate hearing,
Right.
I asked how much we had left with this year's budget, how much levy was left that we didn't raise and appropriate.
Yeah.
And Peter came out and he either said $1,200 or $1,800. So not out of $3,215,000 to be within $1,200 or $1,800. Seems to me that was a pretty close shave.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a pretty close shave. So anyway, there's your levy limit that we had for this fiscal year.
Right.
We're automatically allowed to increase that by 2.5%,
Right.
which is $80,391. The growth number is a number that you would put in.
That's an estimate on our part, right?
Right.
For the assessor's part or us?
Well, I think the assessors.
I talked to the assessors, I talked to the accountant, we left it the same.
Okay.
That, you know, if there's 7 new houses built, that's new growth, you know, that's new value in town that
All right.
did not exist prior, that would be taxable. So you put a figure in there. It's hard for me to think that there's $30,000 worth of tax, you know, of actual taxes.
Right, right.
So, and that gives you that'll give you your 15 levy limit.
Right, okay.
If you stick with that $30,000 of growth. Then you add in what we have for debt exclusions.
Yeah.
So that's including debt exclusions for the school, the highway garage,
Yeah.
and any other notes that we have out.
Grader. Truck.
Right.
Where are we? There's a little list at the end of our budget. It's in here.
Right, it's the,
Yeah, page before.
the truck, the garage, the fire truck, and the grader. We no longer have, last year we also had town common, we don't have that, and we had a highway truck, we don't have that. You'll see them all there because I want to show you what the appropriation was in FY14.
Got it.
That's why some lines are, but
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the debt exclusion. Then you take local receipts,
Yeah.
which would be excise tax, which would be dump fees, which would be all that extra money that passes through. State receipts,
I have that number in bold because that's the one we have the least information about right now.
yeah, we won't have it until they grind out a budget.
That's at the state level determined how much local aid's gonna get spread around, and that could go all over the place. Okay.
Do they still have a date that they generate a cherry sheet?
Yes, they do.
This is
The
the
cherry
cherry
sheet should be out soon,
This is the cherry sheet.
within a month.
School transportation,
And that's vocational ed, transportation reimbursement, I think, isn't it?
only.
Yeah.
And
it's not
this
much.
may be an optimistic number, at
Yeah.
least if the governor's budget carries, but you don't really know.
Now, part of that cherry sheet money,
Yeah.
that, the next line there,
Yeah.
some of that is earmarked directly, it has to be used for the library.
Right.
So that's why that's a negative number.
Yeah.
That's, and then other cherry sheet assessments, that used to be like Franklin County regional governments and a few of those.
Pollution and transportation, surcharges, regional surcharges.
So they get to grab $3,000 back out of that. Whatever the sewer budget ends up being, that's the enterprise fund, right? And then the overlay, which is, that's a negative number because we're gonna hold that out of revenue to pay for, to cover unpaid taxes and abatements.
Got it.
And probably now that, you know, another month or 6 weeks, probably we'll have a pretty good idea on what that is. So that gives you a maximum allowable budget of $4,253,800.
And that's up about 200,000 from what we had budgeted this current fiscal year. So that, in a sense, gives us some additional running room if we need it. Okay.
Well, that's very helpful for me, because that is just a bunch.
But that's going to get eaten up
Confusing.
quickly, because if you look at the schools, we've got some preliminary numbers in on them, and that's going to go up by $50,000, $60,000.
And our tax rate went up more this year than we thought it would based on our budget estimates last year because the valuations fell.
Yeah, that went down to 5 million.
So as tax bills have gone out, people are reacting to that. And I think what's not clear for them is that it wasn't all an increase in budget, it was also a drop in.
Yeah.
Yeah, the rate was disproportionate.
Yeah. But I think it looks impressive as to where we stand with stabilization and free cash position right now. That's very good. And casting minds forward, one of the things you're going to hear from our finance committee that we've already voted on is a proposal that we want to begin funding other post-employment benefits. And that's the sort of thing which we could make up a number, but if the accountants are right with their audit, we have close to $600,000 in unfunded liability for those kinds of benefits, mostly health care for retired employees and so on. And it's arrived at actuarial in terms of estimated lifespans and so on and so forth. So it's not a hard number, but it's on the order of $600,000, which sounds pretty ominous. On the other hand, we wouldn't have to make that up right away. We could put aside $10,000, $1,000, $20,000. If you wanted to try to get that caught up with in, let's say 20 years' time, though, you would take the $600,000 and divide it by 20 years and start to say, we ought to be putting maybe $30,000 aside, not irrevocably. In fact, the recommendation from Scanlon Associates, who does our audit, is if you're going to do that, don't put it into a reserve fund. I think that was the title used. Put it into a OPEB, which is just the abbreviation of the post-employment benefits, stabilization fund, so that you've marked it out as money that's being set aside for covering those liabilities as they come due. But it's a stabilization fund, which technically, if you get into a jam financially as a town, you can, by 2/3 vote, like any other stabilization fund, take money back out of it to cover storm damage or floods or something like that. And so the argument is, more and more towns are going to this model of trying to set aside monies on some kind of a regular savings basis over time. And that's the sort of thing that, for example, if we asked for $30,000, is another $30,000 out of the budget. And 30,000 isn't necessarily the number we're going to come forward with, but the finance committee, I think, believes that we ought to, at this point, start marking out some money, setting it aside, properly labeled and positioned so that that's something that's reducing our liability over time.
If we were to assume that the free cash we're seeing now is maybe double what we would see next year, would we want to do something more aggressive with part of it, given what you're saying, like take a piece of this to sort of pump up that little new stabilization account with some of this money, knowing that as you're going down the road, that 30,000, just using that number, might feel like a big chunk. But if we've got some free cash now that we may never see again that way, would it make sense to
Jumpstart it?
That's a good word.
Possibly.
I'm just
What do you
throwing
mean by
out
double on
You mean
free
taking
cash?
some money out of free cash and putting it in there?
to get
Instead of
started.
funding it through taxation.
No, I just meant to jumpstart it. If you anticipate that next year that free cash
Oh,
might not look that way because we keep tightening up the budget and making it better, so I'd assume there's going to be less free cash. Then should we use some of that this year to do a little jump start to put some in that new account, because it might not ever show up that way again.
I think it's a definite possibility.
you could do that, although I think at the same time, you want to signal to the citizenry of our town that this is the sort of thing that we ought to get started on, so that some of it ought to come out of taxation perhaps, or some appreciation that you got to get started in that fashion. You could take some from free cash, you could, so you don't have to take such a big bite out of taxation first time around. But in time, I think you want to convince people that this is a necessary set aside over time that's going to be required.
Every year.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And I think that what's amazing, still amazes me, is that God knows how many years ago, right? It must 25 years ago.
Yeah.
We started putting a relatively small amount of money aside every year for the park restoration.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that ended up to be more money than they could spend by the time they got to it.
Yeah.
I think there's still $10,000 or so in that account.
Yeah.
So, not that somebody can't find something to spend it on, but I'm, you know, those small efforts.
Yep.
And I think Paulette's point's pretty well taken, is that the first year of putting it as a line item in the budget is the painful thing.
Yeah, that's going to shock. If you said 30,000, that might be a shock. But if you could say, look, how about 10? And we'll put another 15 or something in from free cash.
But I think where it comes from is going to depend on how the budget looks when we get to the end.
Yeah.
Because we may end up having, who knows, I hope we don't, but we may end up having to use $200,000 worth of free cash to fund our operating budget. Depending on how all the numbers come out.
Right.
And depending on where state aid ends up.
Right. I understand.
I'm not having a lot of confidence in what I'm hearing.
It also depends on where we go with the police department too.
But if we did, if it is what you just said, that makes me nervous for the next year to say maybe we need to be less aggressive with doing the budget and cut it back, because otherwise it's going to be harder the following year. You'll be cutting back where you came forward.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
It may or may not. I mean, our next thing that we want to talk about is this special town meeting.
Yes.
And I think the positive thing this year has been that this is only the second special town meeting.
Well, it's the first one in years.
No, we had one for the speed trail.
Ah, forgot that one.
Yeah, we were looking for.
So this is just roughing out items that we've spoken about to this point. The date we were going to sign this is our last meeting in February.
Yes, the Finance Committee Select Board meeting on the 17th, because the next Select Board meeting on the 24th will be too late.
You're talking about March or?
February.
Okay.
We've got to post it 14 days prior since
Yeah.
it's a special. So there's 11 articles on here at this point. I'm hoping there wouldn't be too many others that would rear their head. But, you want to just start from the top?
We covered the first two, haven't we,
covered.
the sewer enterprise fund, that's
Right.
pretty well taken care of.
For the truck, yep.
That's out of their money, basically.
So Article 3
Article
was,
3
Yeah.
with the house fire in January on Briar Hill, the fire department, you know, they didn't plan on, when they budget, they don't budget for
Fires.
huge, well, they do budget for fires, but not anything to that magnification. So Dell at this time is thinking he's going to be about $2,200 short for payroll.
Got it.
okay.
We haven't really delineated on these where we're going to grab the monies from.
Yeah, I see that dot.
But there,
dot, dot.
but there are accounts in this fiscal year's budget that we're not doing a great job expending.
Right.
So instead of dipping into free cash right away, we can
500
move those.
accounts for those. And Veterans benefits local, that's something we're obligated to pay.
Yes.
So that's not even debatable, I would think.
No.
200 to the appeals board.
Yeah, they've pretty much exhausted theirs.
They are out of money, they've just had more appeals
More
than
appeals.
previous years.
Yeah.
Appeals board for taxes or something?
Well,
Zoning.
Zoning, okay.
Yeah, variances people want, special
I think they
permits.
spent quite a lot on, for neighbor store. That was, you know, that was a big,
On the what?
up to the convenience store on getting the, through to put the canopy over with the new fire protection and that sort of thing.
Canopy, what's that mean?
Over the gas
over the
station,
gas-
yes.
Over the gas pumps.
Oh, really? Sure, canopy there?
There will be.
There
Oh, there
will
will be. Oh,
But see, that wasn't allowed in
be.
the
No.
zoning by itself, the way it was.
oh.
And,
That's a fire suppression canopy type thing, you mean?
Yeah,
yeah,
For safety, you know?
and you may not even get soap and wet when it's raining.
why not?
Take all the fun out of it.
Or snow on
Or snowing, right?
And these are some variances we've had in the budget, the FERCog radio maintenance and the,
These, there are two
And-
little ones that the assessment was different from,
we just got that wrong.
but they're both small amounts, so we could handle this differently.
Well, that's a question. I mean, Article 6 and Article 7,
Yeah,
those could be taken care of out of the reserve fund.
they could. Would that help?
Well, it would make it 2 articles shorter for the special town meeting.
It's less than $100.
We typically hold that 3,000 or whatever it is to the very end of ours to kind of clean up, but I don't think we used much of any of it last year, did we?
I don't think so. I'm sure I,
I think we should take it out, take those two out of the reserve.
But we need to have a finance committee meeting for that,
Oh,
don't we? It's in the-
Are you having a finance committee meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, we will have one.
no, no.
Yes, if we were having one now.
Do you have the forms we could sign?
I can get them, or I could bring them
Do all of us have to sign, or just the chair?
to the next meeting. I don't remember, I think it's just the chair.
For next meeting.
I won't be here next
And
week.
I will.
So why don't we vote on these right now as a finance committee and clean those right out of the system? It's
Yeah.
terribly efficient, I'm a little suspicious of this. Okay,
Tom's trying to spend your money, huh?
I would move to vote and transfer up to $63.16 from the finance committee's reserve fund to the FERCog radio maintenance account.
I second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
300. FinCom.
That's in our minutes too, right?
You'll put that in our minutes, will you, Mary?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. And in like manner, I would move to transfer up to $31.08 from the Finance Committee's reserve fund to the ambulance radio assessment account. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Nope.
No.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. That passes unanimously. And I will take care of signing the paperwork in accord with what Mary provides me, and I think that will take care of it.
So Article 8 is now Article 6.
Yes.
So Article 8, last year at annual town meeting, we took no money from the Fred Cross Fund,
Oh,
which is normally used for painting and a certain amount of routine maintenance in the town hall. I mean, it can be used for any number of things, but that has been the habit to use it for that. And so this year, when the fellows showed up and painted the town hall and the firehouse, we didn't really have an account. But what we did is we paid those expenses from the town hall fire department capital fund.
right.
So by voting this money, what we want to do is replenish that account of the amount of what it costs to do that, to do those projects, which is $4,200. And so that would give us more money to do the project, you know, the insulation, the cellar, the whatever we need to get done. There's electrical work. Electrical work is probably the main thing we want to get done with the firehouse.
Does this Red Cross Fund have, you know, roughly what the balance is in that fund at this time?
I think
Yeah,
it's
the
on the
Red
back
Cross
page.
Fund has, Red Cross General Fund has $51,987.88.
At this rate, and I know we've taken money out in past years, will we eventually exhaust that fund? It can't be earning enough to keep replenishing, can it?
Well, I believe like the other funds, and I may have the detailing here, you can't spend the principal. I think in most of these funds, the principal is reserved and...
Oh, so the $50-some thousand is what's available to spend?
No, let me see if there's a breakdown here. There isn't a breakdown here, but I can get a breakdown.
We had it. You gave it to, no, you just gave us the trust funds. Was that Fred Cross in that?
It is in the trust funds.
I think that the sheet you gave us, it was very interesting how small the principal was.
It was a
on
couple
some of
weeks
these.
ago.
So a
Like
lot of what we're
Fred
looking at
Cross.
is accumulated interest over the
Like
years.
Fred Cross left $3,000 or something.
Wow. So we can't spend the $3,000, but everything that's accumulated over the years
I
can be
mean,
spent.
and I'm just kind of pulling that.
Yeah, no, I
But it's a,
I understand. But it's not $250,000 that sits there for $50,000.
no, but when you get a chance to look at the trust funds that are left to the town, you'll be amazed at the balances.
Okay.
Bills and bills and what's
A
available.
lot of those were left when the Selectboard was the Board of Health and the Board of Assessors and the Board of Public Welfare.
Right. Yeah, okay.
And people would say, you know,
All right.
for people at the town farm or to be used for. So that's the background on that.
Okay. Now, Article 9.
Article 9
The book.
is, Article 9 is to settle the property lines on the little parking lot on Bronson Avenue next to Sherry Scott's. The boundaries don't seem to be terribly clear. And this is a, what do they call this? A boundary line settlement. It doesn't really change the deed as much as say that this is what we're agreeing to.
Oh, they were in a recent select board meeting, were they not? Dan Werner,
Yes.
the surveyor.
Yes.
Yeah. Sure, right, okay.
And, and Article 10
Yep.
is easements along the Ashfield Lake Dam
Yep.
that DEP is requiring
Right.
for us to do maintenance on the dam and keep that. and the Nolans and Deckers have been very kind to allow those maintenance easements. And,
Yeah, this
So
only,
this-
and no fee, no,
This just formalizes that?
that's this form, this will be recorded.
this only says from Decker Machine Works, it doesn't say.
Oh, well, Article 11 is the one from
Okay.
Nolans.
Okay. There it is, okay. So that's no
The
monetary
one
issue.
with Deckers actually includes being able to get to the hydrant. We got a hydrant on top of that dam, a dry hydrant on top of the dam, and there was no easement to get to it. So now this formalizes that easement. Plus gives us, I believe it's 25 feet, isn't it? Ron is the one that really put in a tremendous,
Yeah.
20.
Just 20 feet.
yeah, 20 feet. Yeah, a permanent 20-foot wide access easement.
But this looks like, if they don't grant you this, you're gonna take it by eminent domain.
I know.
Well, and any real estate
Otherwise,
that the town does is still gonna say eminent domain.
Yeah, got it.
it sounds so mean though.
Even if it's friendly, it's.
But this is still friendly.
Friendly,
with
I mean,
Decker.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You can tell by the,
Yep,
you know, it's just granting it.
Got it.
It's not
got it.
a fee, it's not.
So I was absent the night of February 15th when you had the presentation by Ty and Bond. Is your plan therefore to authorize these studies? Where does that stand? Is the select board having a discussion about that?
I was absent that night.
Yeah, we just call it alone.
But
So-
we discussed it
We
at our
did,
last
we
select board.
we did discuss it at our last slide.
Because one of those proposals, and that's just to study the problem in some further details, around $77,000. And if you take the retaining wall proposal, our share of it would be on the order of, say, $6,000. So it's serious money. Is that going to be authorized? Are you envisaging moving forward with proposing that in the annual town meeting or a special town meeting? Not here, obviously. Any thoughts about that? It's not, he's thinking.
Who's thinking? Oh, I was waiting for Paulette since she was here.
Oh,
I was-
no, we did discuss it.
Well, what does Ron say? What
The
is-
6th is kind of waiting to find out from Field,
Yeah,
because you can't do a third without
Right.
doing the other 2/3. That wasn't a big number. The big number was the dam. And there were 2 positions. You had one possibly thinking about doing it in pieces over multiple years, or the other one is just to do it and get it done, to know what the big number looks like, because Ron's concerned he wants to try to be able to go for a grant next year. And we need that study
has to be
completed
shovel ready.
But the grant needs to be,
so that you can do the grant.
doesn't the grant need to be applied for like in the next month?
No, they changed the date on that.
Oh, they did?
So it won't be till
We
the
wouldn't
fall.
make it for June.
Yeah, I was gonna
So
say,
either
there was no
next
way.
year.
Was it, it was June?
They moved it from
They moved it
September to
September
June.
to June.
Yeah.
What was
right.
the shape? The
That's
shape
what
of the dam, did it go
So they
from-
moved it
is
back, Mary?
fair?
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. And you don't want to get in a position where the state tells you you must.
Well, that's something that would seem to, we're going to have to incorporate into our discussions of budget, as to whether we do anything during this particular set of meetings. The other thing I think about,
Did you remember?
No, I mean, on this,
One about letting the trustees run the wall.
yeah,
And then the second one was if you wait until it's, if it was waiting until the first edition, easier to get the grants.
wasn't that so?
No, but yeah, they're saying, when there's just a moderate risk, the grants aren't always accepted right off. When there's a extreme risk,
right.
there's more chance of us getting a grant.
But if
So
we
the
don't
question-
wait, then we have to get it done in a certain amount of time, and that's even worse.
So you should go right off of that, am I right? Is that what they said?
That's what they recommended,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, that's one element that I think has to be somehow addressed in our ongoing meetings. The other thing that occurs to me is, we had a presentation, or there was a presentation about the Highland Ambulance interest in having a new facility built on a piece of land. And I got the impression from the presentation I made that night at the select board was that there would be a request from the various towns, participating towns, to come up with money for the fire. And I don't know what the shape of that is. We got a private letter encouraging my wife and myself to kind of, donate to this cause. But it's not clear to me whether the town is at a point where they're going to pony up money, or we have any proposal for them as to how much they're looking for, or what?
We've not received anything from them, including their budget yet.
Right.
Should we add some items to this list as little holding places
Yeah,
for
well,
that? Because you've already mentioned 3 things.
Certainly in our agenda, and I've got another one coming.
Yeah.
Brian's here, he may have a way to elaborate on this for me, but I got from Jennifer Williams, who's a member of our greening committee in town, consisting of Jennifer and Brian and Mary Quigley. They've been doing great work in terms of helping secure a grant for about $141,000, some of which has been spent for various kinds of energy conservation projects around town, town hall. They're working in the library, they've got some ideas for the town garage, the fire station, and so on. And it's kind of a recap they gave of all the stuff that they've done, that they're in the process of doing, is yet to be done. And they're at a point, though, where they say there's now an opportunity to apply for a grant. I think it's from the state.
Grant.
That would help us, if we wanted to, hire a energy manager, somebody who would on an ongoing basis see to it that we continue to look for ways to save energy and so on. It's arguable that some of the energy savings that have been realized and will be realized, some of those savings could be devoted to funding such a position. But it's important to realize that if we did something, and the deadline for applying is apparently February 14th, that the state would help with only the first 2 years. Thereafter, it would come to the town to be kind of committed to the idea of paying for this individual. I don't think it has to be a full-time position. I think it could be a part-time position. And I've gotten sort of ballpark estimates from Jennifer, like $10,000 a year, $16,000 a year, something in that range. Again, it's one of these people that if you wanted to fund that, it's kind of a commitment we'd be making going forward. The first year would be technically free. The second year, the state would pay a little bit less of the position, whatever it is. And the third year, we'd be on our own. So it's another element in our budget discussions, and I'm not quite sure how to proceed. I think it's even wise for us to apply.
Mary, have you seen anything about an application?
No, I had a talk with Brian maybe a month ago or something about it, but...
Yeah, the announcement of the grant was back in December sometime, I think.
And I think I may have thought at that time that we weren't going to pursue it because it's set up the way it is, but...
Yeah, my initial reaction was that I don't have time to look at this, but the more I thought about it, it was the reason I don't have time to look at it is I'm too busy with any green community stuff. And the level of my time anyway that's gone into the green community stuff over the last year is not sustainable as far as I'm concerned. Mary and Jen have put quite a bit of time into it as well, and they're not retired. Right. Looking at this, I thought, well, maybe this is a way of sustaining the green community stuff because it's, the amount of effort it's taking just isn't going to continue, I don't think. There were really two pieces to the discussion. One of them was, we'd had this thought back when we first got the Green Communities grant, was that we maybe should think about doing something like setting aside some percentage of the savings that we realize as a result of what we did with the Green Communities money each year into a fund that we would then use for doing more projects. And then this grant thing came along, and then, well, maybe there's a way of tying the two together and using, setting up that fund and using some of it to fund this position.
Did we run into any problem with the mechanism for setting up a fund like that?
The feedback we got in looking into it a little bit was that it's a little bit difficult to do because you would have to do, well, at least what I was originally thinking was let's take 50% or whatever we thought we saved last year and put that into a fund for next year. That the complication there is that you would have to do that in town meeting each year. Would have to be another allocation that you put up and voted on and so on. You'd have to come up with a justification for it and so on.
Yeah, and at the same time, we're dreaming of all these other places we need to spend money. You know, you save money in one place and you find a place to spend it in the other.
Yeah.
It's a stubborn fact, you can only spend it generally once.
Tom keeps pulling it up to us. It's very troubling. Yeah.
I don't see any problem, but tell me if there is one, of applying for the grant, and then we can make the decision if it's worthwhile to accept it after we find out if we even get it.
Part of the application is some credible evidence that the town is going to be funding it longer term. For example, a sample article for the town meeting, the upcoming town meeting, to put in place this funding for it.
Is it possible to see that the state may be heading in that direction where it may become less of an option and more of a requirement to have somebody like this, and this is the start of going down that path?
No idea.
And do you, I'm sorry, really, but when we talked about it, I didn't have a sense if there is enough energy savings ongoing within town buildings in Ashfield that can be done to keep someone working at that on a regular basis.
Well, if you believe the auditor's projections for what we've saved by the projects we've currently got either implemented or in the process of going forward, it's somewhere in the range of $14,000 a year of savings.
But I assume that's diminishing potential as more and more things are brought as far along as they can be.
Yeah, the payoff, get diminishing returns there. We're trying to pick the highest leverage things as we go forward. There's enough fairly high leverage things that have been identified in the audit that we're not really there yet. We could probably do nearly twice what the original Green Communities grant was covering and justify it with the savings that would be realized. That was part of my thinking of trying to get some capital reinvestment things set up so that we would be able to continue to make energy saving investments without having to allocate the money in the town meeting. But there's also potential to get more Green Communities money. Once we've expended the whole grant fund, the grant that we got, and completed all the projects that we funded with that, we can then apply for additional grant
But
money.
that's not leverage solely against having a manager.
No, it's independent of that.
So they announced this in December, and they wanted some credible evidence. Okay, and I'm thinking December, we're in the holiday season with New Year's and everything else, right? They announce it in December, and then they want by Valentine's Day, they want everybody to get on board with something credible to grab some manager money. Any idea how much we would qualify for? I mean, do they give you a range of dollars or?
They talk about, I think a full-time energy manager, they, I think, allow up to like a $50,000 amount. And Jennifer Williams, in her little email to me, said we're thinking maybe somebody 1 day a week. So if they took a fifth of that, let's say $10,000. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's a realistic.
the grant is kind of open-ended in what you can ask for, whatever you think you need.
So it sounds like the first year, it could be $10,000, and then the second year, you still got to have the person, and you got $5,000, and the third year, it's all yours.
Yeah, I think something like that.
And what they're saying is over that time, the manager will have got the savings to fund the position themselves. And I think if I understand your comment is that once this green stuff is done to help with energy, is there a need after it's done? And I think maybe with our old buildings and just the drain on the environment, that there is always going to be a need.
Yeah, this building is an example. We're just working on trying to do tighten up the envelope and improve the heating system for the office space. We're not doing anything for the rest of the building, and the rest of the building needs it much. I mean, in terms of just energy loss, the rest of the building is in much worse shape than the offices are.
But it's mostly not heated,
Right. But, well, even when we do heat the upstairs, it's not, I wouldn't characterize it as very well done. Sitting under windows and feeling like, yeah, when it's cold outside, you're sitting, even when the heat's on, you sit under those windows upstairs and it feels like the window's open.
So here we are 11 days from when this grant's supposed to be. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I was agreeing with you up until they said that they would like some indication of some sort that the town would plan on continuing this once the grant is expired, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, the wording asks for the plan for how the town will fund it in the future, and then that's since been further qualified. There was just a note that came out a couple days ago answering questions that they were getting from towns about, well, we would have to, that just has to go through town meeting, and that's not until summer, and how do we, and the answer to that was, well, if you provided the text of just the proposed article for the town meeting to cover the funding of it in the future, that would be okay. But you'd have to then follow up with what the vote was on the article in the town meeting later if you did get the grant and so on.
We could rig something up and kind of make a pitch and see what they do.
Well, or instead of getting sucked into something that we may not want to be in 3 or 4 years down the road.
Yeah.
Why don't we add to our, how would it be to add to our list that if there's a manager needed at some level, that the town just fund that position?
And not worry about
If the grant comes out this year, something will come out next year.
I'm not against the idea of compensating somebody to follow up on it.
Yeah.
There is no set number of years commitment to funding this. It's just saying, how are you going to fund it in the future? There wasn't any commitment that you're going to fund it for X number of years. My interpretation was that you could decide you're going to end it after 3 years or something.
Well,
and not be in violation.
So you're suggesting we not apply to the grant, for the grant?
Well, I tell you, I always have a
11
bad
days.
feeling when I have to make a decision under duress.
Right.
I really don't think there's a good option. You know, and I've never been successful at it. And
But still supporting the idea, just not going with the grant,
All
yeah.
right, all right. What you'd gain by applying for the grant and being successful is if we were to go to a part-time person, let's say a 15,000, I'll make up a number, $15,000 a year for somebody to do this work on a 1 day a week basis or some such notion. You'd save yourself, as I understand it, $15,000 for fiscal year 2015 and $12,000 the second year, and then the state would cut us off. So we would have lost potentially $15,000, $25,000, something in that range.
That's if we don't go with the grant this year.
Right, right.
We're just not to say they might have something next year.
Well, they might.
But if you did go for it, what's the possibility, and I'm going off something you said, Tim, that by the time you get to the third year, if you planned accordingly, I wonder if that's something you could regionalize, in quotes, with some other small town that also went for it, and you end up sharing a person.
Yeah. Could do.
And getting the other towns to pay.
Could do.
Well, because you said then in some cases, some of the additional grants down the road will be given to where there's some regionalization, so you could make that.
Yeah.
If,
Yeah.
I don't know which little towns around us would be doing it.
Well, you could argue this is a resource that's being shared, and thereby it's worth somehow
See if
funding.
you couldn't get some
Yeah.
money for it.
I think the question on the table though is, can we provide the paperwork to support you applying for the grant in the next 11 days?
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Well, we can supply that. We just took 2 articles off the special town meeting one. We could put one back on.
Right.
By the time we have the special town meeting, we may decide to table it,
That's right.
but at least it would go as part of the grant application.
But you could show that the draft motion is the following, and this would be our intention.
how soon do they, after the 14th, are they figuring they're going to award these? It's hard to tell.
Yeah, when they do make promises, they don't keep them, so.
So is this something that you and your team could, if we provided the supporting paperwork,
Yeah, Jenny's been working
Jenny's
on,
ready to go?
on filling
Jennifer
out
sent me
the-
a partially filled out application, so I've got that. And I told her I'd try to talk to her tomorrow, based on tonight's conversation, to see if there's a basis for going forward.
And maybe she can make a recommendation on the type of, the article
I can talk to her further.
that we put on for the special town meeting, and that might be enough for the grant paperwork.
If we're going to sign on the 17th, the 10th is the last chance to talk about it at all, which means I really have to have the final version here next Monday for, I think you won't be here. You'll be here, Ron won't be here. For your board to approve and then get it to town clerk, so town council, sorry, so it was back in time to sign the following Monday and post right after that.
Well, the one thing we would need out of this gathering tonight might be a simple draft of the kind of an article that would appear in the warrant for the special town meeting. And is that something we can craft in the course of the next day or two?
See, I don't know that because I haven't seen it.
I know.
And it sounds to me
And
like
so
Jenny,
I think what has to happen is it needs to come in.
Yeah.
And so, do you already have it somewhere? So we can get it pulled
No,
together on
I
what?
don't think I even have the grant. Did I see that?
well, it's
Yeah.
if Jenny could make
Community
some
things.
recommendations. for you.
Yeah, he's,
Probably came
You want her to
electronic.
work on it.
yeah, it was a email. You forwarded the version you
Yeah.
got to me. We
All right,
we had
so-
gotten it directly.
I can pull that up and take a look at it. And you talk to Jennifer and have something, and
But if it's gonna appear on the warrant, it has to be something, I think, approved by the select board, doesn't it, no? You can't just make it up and
Unless you want to
shoot
get
it.
150 signatures or whatever it takes to put it on a special town meeting.
So the
They have a meeting
10%.
on the 10th.
We got a meeting Monday.
Oh, you do?
Monday, the 10th.
But that is the last chance for the select.
Right.
Approve it because the signed copy will come the following week, or the copy to sign.
Well, shall we try this? Let me work with Jen Williams and see what we can produce, working with Mary, to have something by next Monday when you see it. And if it seems agreeable or you want to modify it, do that, and we'll use that as the basis for saying, this is the kind of commitment the town would make. I mean, I'm not sure the dollar amounts, I'm not even sure we have to put those in, but it would be something I think we could craft with, with some.
But it would have to be a dollar amount,
Well, we'll make that
I
up.
think.
I mean, we'll figure something out.
Well, I think Jim
Why?
would be wonderful.
Why is there gonna be a dollar? Isn't it fully funded the first year?
Yeah, but they would want to see some indication of what you're intending long-term, I think. So you'd have to say something about, would the town agree to establish the position of an energy manager to work one day a week or
I would say since it's nearly 10 o'clock, we're spending quite a bit of time talking about something that's purely speculative.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're willing to work with Jen, Ted, I think that's great.
Give it a try.
And Mary, you can spend a little time on it, we can pull something together, and we'll have a lot better idea of what's going on. My concern is that we would be committing I'm not excited about committing myself under a short stick to something that...
Let me read you what came from Dewar, the guidance from Dewar. Municipalities can provide a copy of a draft town meeting warrant to vote on approval of cost share for the energy manager position. The town approval of the warrant can be contingent on being awarded an energy manager grant. If awarded, execution of a grant contract will be contingent upon evidence of the municipality approval of the cost share.
So in other words, a draftable article.
On the contingent that they get the grant.
And then they won't actually send you the money until you've voted it.
Yeah.
But what does cost share mean? That sounds different.
That's fully funded the first year, partially funded the second year, and not funded the third year.
And again, it's contingent, it can say in the draft, contingent on receiving the grant. Isn't that what it said?
And so, quick question.
Yes.
Two contingencies.
Does it have to go on the special town meeting warrant, or could it be a freestanding draft warrant that we would say we would take to ATM
Could be.
at the time?
A copy of a draft town meeting warrant.
That's pretty wide open.
It is.
Yep. That takes some of the pressure off.
But you still would want to look at it by next week.
Yes, but
the
if we
select
don't
board-
tie it into the...
I don't think you have to.
That would be one.
The only pressure would be getting their deadline of February 14th. Of a draft of a contingent warrant.
Here's the guidance on the funding for future years. Dewar is not seeking committed funding for future years, but rather a plan for how the municipality intends to support the position for future years. E.g., fund with energy savings achieved, seeking funding from outside sources. Those sources should be named in application. The municipality must state that it is committed to seeking future municipal approval of any funding needed to support the position.
They're artists, aren't they, of using a lot of words to not say a hell of a lot?
Get you in the corner.
We have a plan.
I'll get something to you.
Call us to order.
Let's take a shot at it, see what you think about it Monday night. And Brian, can you just send me a copy of that email?
Ted, if you have it ready, could you email it out before?
Oh, yeah. All right.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Jan. Thank you.
Any other things to add to the budget list? I mean, I think you hit it. I mean, the big one to me is that dam business. And I'm really not sure I have a good handle on that yet. Seems like a really big nut to, it's a big nut to crack.
So did we say I would make lines for Highland Ambulance Building, OPEB, the Energy Manager, and dam study funding? Add those lines in
In
there.
the field,
The retaining wall.
the wall.
For the work itself, we have enough money for the
Oh, that's right,
study.
we do have enough work, we do have enough money for this stuff.
So do we want to wait and see what the study says or start?
Well, why don't you make a note? I mean, we may want to set some money aside.
Okay.
Because
We're talking about next fiscal year.
We're starting to have more needs than money, aren't we?
We'll see how that account can get drained down.
And we don't have
And we have,
any early indications of capital needs, do we? Tractors, trucks?
We haven't gotten the
Graders.
highway budget yet.
No.
I've spent some time with Tom.
Yeah.
His original schedule had backhoe
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
in a perfect world, it would be backhoe and a new dump truck.
Yeah.
I think we've at least come down to backhoe or a truck. And it may almost be, maybe what we need is the truck, but I think a lot of it's gonna,
Yeah.
I think that the really big thing that we've got to think about is I believe that we're probably going to be looking at $80,000 in additional winter road money this fiscal year.
How about the police department SUV? Is that okay? You don't need a vehicle.
Yeah, I don't know about police department, fire department. I don't know if Diane's even given thought to that. I mean, the cruiser's brand new. The Ford Explorer was explained to us at one time as being, on its last legs and so on, although it looks shiny to me. I don't know.
Well, I remember last year, I believe what I threw out was, if we're going to be a two-cruiser town, does that mean we're only going to buy one every 4 or 5 years?
Well, if we keep going, replace it after the news cruiser is paid for, right? What's that, 3 years?
It would be interesting to see how many miles they put on.
Right. I think their mileage is down a lot. They haven't been patrolling a lot. And their fuel account is pretty robust still.
Well, you can't get fooled by that, because I think Tom only reconciles that account between the highway department and the police department twice a year.
Okay. But I still think,
Wouldn't that be correct,
I
Mary?
think that's right. But I do also think that the patrolling is not what it was before.
yeah,
I mean, hasn't been for a bit, there hasn't been.
right. I mean, part of it was, I think, a function of our simply cutting the fuel budget and saying, stop driving around so much. The second part of it was, I think you've got people in place now who kind of don't think you need to drive around that much. So it's some of both, I guess.
And we tried to get a speed trailer as a way of
Yeah,
not having
Somebody
officers on the
all
road.
right.
Put the-
Well, anyway, okay, yeah, so we've got a list of stuff to still think about.
But that may be an article that'll go on last minute on this special town meeting, is
What?
something on winter roads.
Winter roads, yeah.
And
I was
did
just
you-
going to ask, do you want for this special town meeting?
Well, we're going to sign a warrant.
Right.
I mean, we may decide that. I think we'll know more Friday, right? When we get the expense report, it'll tell us how overdrawn we are. If we're not overdrawn by $15,000, I'll be surprised.
You will.
And it's only, what's today? Today's only the 3rd of February.
Yeah, we're 92.5%.
As of 2 weeks ago.
As of the last quarter.
Right, 24.
And the account is set up for working on these two buildings. We added, what, 15,000, 4,000 a year? that would be something one would have anticipated. We might be adding again. So that's probably on there, but in terms of allocating some money to it.
All right,
Okay,
thank you. I think we got a good start on it.
I think so. Thanks.
All right, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yep, looking forward to it.
Make a motion that we adjourn at 10:04.
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Finance committee's happy to all.
Yeah, already